The story began with a young boy standing over the mutilated body of his grandfather, who had been sliced in half before his eyes. In that moment, he felt no grief. Only later did the weight of regret settle in, as he realized he had failed to honor his grandfather properly. Memories surfaced. Moments of joy spent together, from gathering herbs in the forest to the pride in discovering a spirit-linked plant. His grandfather had praised the find, confident they could sell it for a high price. Another memory returned. The boy had stumbled upon a fox den containing only unborn pups. When questioned if he had harmed them, he had said no, fearing the pain it would cause the mother. His compassion had stirred something in his grandfather, who, deeply moved, made the boy swear never to reveal the truth of what he was. Years passed. The boy, now older and burdened by remorse, stood alone and shouted his sorrow to the skies. He could no longer keep that promise. With resolve, he picked up a scythe and set out to find the one who had murdered his grandfather. Some time later, in Jeongyang village, a carriage rolled through the center of town carrying prisoners. Curious and furious villagers gathered, hurling insults as they noticed a boy among the captives. At a nearby inn, a middle-aged man with no clear origin watched with interest while locals speculated about the boy's crimes. An informant labeled him the Scythe Demon, accusing him of slaying 50 people using only a scythe. The man, unfazed by the villagers' shock, considered the advantage of employing someone so easily discarded by society. When a rock flew from the crowd and struck the prisoner's side, the man caught a glimpse of the boy's face and instantly recognized him. He knew then that this boy, Jeong, was exactly who he needed. Inside Gyeomuk jail, Jeong, known now as the Scythe Demon, sat in reflection. He had chased his grandfather's killer, though he lacked the martial training to confront him. Without strength, he had no hope for revenge. Just then, a strange scent drifted in, thick, unmistakable smoke from a sleep-inducing herb. He struggled to remain awake before falling into unconsciousness. A figure entered quietly and attempted to release him. As the restraints loosened, Jeong awakened, lashed out, and tried to escape. His effort failed as another presence caught him from behind. The stranger revealed himself as the man from the inn. He quickly subdued Jeong with a swift strike, forcing him to cough blood. At that moment, a second figure arrived. The new arrival addressed the man as Guard Gam and introduced himself as Gam's master. He bore a startling resemblance to Jeong. With a mocking tone, he pointed out the uncanny likeness between them. Fate had drawn one to power as a noble and left the other to rot as a criminal. Rather than execute him, the young noble offered a proposition. Jeong would assume his identity as the third son of the Mok family, Jeong Mok. In return, he would gain food, luxury, and status. However, before he could earn these rewards, he needed to prove his loyalty. A pill was placed before him, likely poisoned, and only upon completing a given task would the antidote be provided. Motivated by vengeance and the memory of his grandfather, Jeong accepted. The nobleman gave his approval, and Guard Gam removed the chains. Once freed, Jeong walked outside, dazed by the sudden turn of events. However, something within him shifted. Without hesitation, Jeong reached for the young noble and snapped his neck. The motion was swift, decisive. He turned to Gam, announcing the noble's death without remorse, then demanded to know what came next. The false heir was gone. Jeong had taken his place. A memory surged back into Jeong's mind. Before his arrest, he had ruthlessly butchered a crowd of terrified townspeople, gripping a severed head in one hand. Their screams and desperate pleas only deepened his twisted satisfaction. In that moment, he fully embraced the truth his grandfather had tried to bury. He did not kill out of necessity but out of pleasure. Realization hit him like a blow. This darkness was not a mask, it was who he truly was. As he stood, stunned by his own reflection, he sensed a presence nearby. A figure approached, face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Only a long scar beneath the left eye was visible. The stranger paused, clearly unsettled by the sight of Jeong's blood-stained hand and eerie composure. That look confirmed something had shifted. A far more dangerous path had begun. Despite lacking formal martial training, Jeong faced the man's drawn sword. The stranger struck with lethal precision, yet Jeong survived. Seized by the throat, he found himself studied with cold fascination. The stranger could not understand how someone untrained had infiltrated their ranks. Declaring him too dangerous to live, he slashed Jeong, who collapsed in a pool of his own blood. Somehow, he survived again and was taken into custody. The murder of the impostor young master had opened the door to a second chance. Later, Gam, filled with rage, grabbed Gchan by the neck and demanded answers. Gchan, unshaken, explained that he had simply removed a potential threat. Gam froze, stunned by the clarity and indifference in his tone. He then asked if Gchan had ever considered being killed. Gchan replied that if that were true, he would already be dead. He guessed correctly that Gam felt no true loyalty toward the real young master. Disturbed by the boy's insight, Gam threw him to the ground and drew a knife. Gchan calmly pointed out that he had already swallowed a poison pill and that only Gam held the antidote. Killing him now would serve no purpose. Gam paused, then decided to spare him. From that moment, Gchan was given the identity of the Grand Yeongmok family's third young master, a carefully chosen impostor. Gam brought him to the manor under strict instructions. He was to avoid all contact with the actual family and take the neutralizing agent every 24 hours. Any delay would mean certain death from the poison. One misstep could cost him his life. Though bound by this control, Gchan viewed it as a rare opportunity. He had cheated death and stepped into a new life. Beneath the surface, a quiet resolve took shape. He would master martial arts, seek revenge for his grandfather's suffering, and track down the real killer. Whatever the cost, he had no intention of remaining a pawn forever. The following morning, Gam placed his disciple, Gchan, in charge of monitoring Gchan. Although tasked with a serious responsibility, Gchan treated it with arrogance. He dismissed Gchan as a mere pretender, relying on the poison in his system to ensure obedience. Gam, however, reminded him that Gchan had already proven difficult to manage, having killed the real young master. Despite his bravado, Gchan feared disobeying direct orders. He stationed himself outside Gchan's quarters, determined to fulfill his duty. Inside the room, Gchan sat in silence, pondering the strange circumstances that led to his role. The idea of living as a substitute stirred more questions than answers. He began to suspect the manor was hiding secrets deeper than he had imagined. Noticing Gchan's impatience and overconfidence, Gchan quietly slipped outside under the guise of needing fresh air. When Gchan confronted him and attempted to drag him back, Gchan turned the tables. With precise timing, he flipped Gchan using the same technique he had once endured from Gam. Imitating the pressure point technique he had seen only once, he struck. Gchan's limbs went numb as his body seized up in helpless paralysis. After a brief struggle, Gchan gasped out a warning. If Gchan failed to take the antidote in time, the poison would kill him. In response, Gchan bit his own finger and forced Gchan to swallow a drop of his blood. From childhood, Gchan had studied toxicology and experimented with rare venoms. His blood now carried a potent blend of poisons that made the original neutralizers ineffective. Gchan's life now depended entirely on him. Terrified, Gchan quickly gave in to Gchan's demand for information. Gchan pressed him for details about the manor and its secrets, promising death by poison if the answers lacked substance. With no alternative, Gchan complied. Elsewhere, the head of the Yeongmok family lay bedridden, suffering from an unknown illness that left the household in uncertainty. The manor's doctor struggled to diagnose the affliction, and without a declared successor, the family faced an impending power struggle. Tensions escalated further when Lord Indon Mok's first wife, Lady Sok, entered the master's chamber, suggesting they call a diviner to treat Lord Mok. The doctor, already frustrated, objected to the woman's decision, scoffing at superstition. Despite his protests, she asserted her authority and ordered all non-family members to leave the hall. She believed conventional medicine had failed and insisted that spiritual insight was the only remaining path. Meanwhile, Gchan, still under Gchan's control, guided him through a concealed passage deep within the manor. Hidden corridors twisted through the estate's foundations, designed long ago to shield secrets from both allies and enemies. Their destination was the master's chamber, the very place where the dying lord resided. Gchan followed in silence, eyes fixed forward, his mind brimming with thoughts. This was no longer just a survival game. Every step he took inside this manor brought him closer to the heart of its tangled web. The truth behind the illness, the succession, and the real reason behind his role as a stand-in were now within reach. He would uncover it all, even if it meant becoming the threat everyone feared. Gchan uncovered a grim truth. Gam and the original third young master had orchestrated a brutal plan. Their intention was to let Gchan and the first son destroy each other, clearing the path for the original third son's return. The first son, Yonho Mok, was known throughout the manor for his drunkenness, reckless violence, and insatiable greed. In contrast, the second son, Yeonpyeong Mok, possessed a shrewd mind and a calculating nature. Neither seemed fit to lead, yet both played critical roles in the unfolding scheme. The plan became clear. Yongho would be lured to eliminate the stand-in, unaware that he was merely a pawn. Following that, the first and second sons would likely clash, eliminating each other and leaving the original third son to ascend without resistance. However, Jeong-un's unexpected act of killing the real third young master had altered everything. This single decision introduced a volatile element no one had foreseen. While guiding Jeong-un through the manor, Gchan grew suspicious. He questioned why Jeong-un was so desperate to reach the master's chamber. Jeong-un calmly explained that the matter involved life and death. He then advised Gchan to keep the encounter hidden from Gam, knowing full well that secrecy was his best defense. During this time, a diviner named Shin Myo arrived to address the Lord's worsening illness. He requested complete access and insisted on conducting a binding ritual before the dark affliction grew irreversible. The First Lady approved, offering 300 silver coins in exchange for locating the Lord's seal and a secret tome. All outsiders were dismissed as preparations began. Outside the hall, the First Lady crossed paths with Yucheon, the fourth son born to a concubine she held in disdain. Jeong-un observed silently as Gchan explained that Yucheon possessed remarkable lower body strength, a key foundation for internal martial arts. This insight made Jeong-un question his own potential. He wondered whether, with enough training, he could surpass Gam. Gchan responded bluntly, mastering internal martial arts required years of disciplined effort, typically between 5 to 9 years. It was unlikely that Jeong-un could achieve such strength quickly enough. However, when Jeong-un voiced his prediction that the manor would soon abandon both of them, Gchan's stunned reaction confirmed it. That moment shifted their relationship. Jeong-un extended a proposal for allegiance, offering Gchan a role at his side. After a moment's hesitation, Gchan accepted, and together they slipped away from the courtyard unnoticed. Meanwhile, inside the master's chamber, the ritual began. The atmosphere thickened as Shin Myo chanted, attempting to expel the unseen malevolence afflicting Lord Mok. The Lord writhed in agony, his body resisting the diviner's incantations with unnatural force. The room darkened, shadows stretching unnaturally as the ritual intensified. Despite his experience, Shin Myo quickly realized the force he faced exceeded anything he had encountered. The evil spirit retaliated with overwhelming power, hurling him across the room into the wall. In the chaos that followed, Jeong-un and Gchan burst into the hall. The diviner, dazed and battered, struggled to his feet and demanded to know their identities. Jeong-un offered no reply. Without hesitation, he approached the weakened Lord Mok, kneeling in front of him in a silent gesture of respect. The diviner shouted urgently, ordering Jeong-un and Gchan to leave the chamber without delay. He struggled to maintain control over the force that had bound Lord Mok, now under the influence of an evil spirit. At the mention of such a spirit, Gchan immediately recognized the man's true profession. The diviner continued pleading with them to escape, warning that the situation could escalate beyond his ability to manage. Before either could react further, Lord Mok's body convulsed with violent spasms, then began to float above the floor. The diviner's eyes widened with dread as he confirmed the possession. He ordered Jeong-un and Gchan to restrain the levitating master to prevent him from severing the ceremonial bindings. However, despite their attempts, Lord Mok broke free. His body snapped through the ritual seals and struck Gchan hard, wounding him. Witnessing this, Jeong-un acted on instinct. He surged forward and severed the possessed lord's arm in a single, calculated strike, halting the surge of dark energy. The diviner quickly stabilized the wound with a chant, his tone faltering under the strain of the situation. Having failed in his initial task, the diviner prepared to flee, hoping to slip away without facing consequences. However, Jeong-un, anticipating betrayal, stopped him at sword point. Demanding answers, he asked who was behind the attempt on the master's life. Cornered, the diviner confessed. The First Lady had orchestrated the attack, seeking both the family seal and the secret martial tome to ensure her son's inheritance. Upon hearing the truth, Gchan urged Jeong-un to preserve Lord Mok's life. He insisted that allowing Gchan to become the family leader would spell ruin. Despite the urgency, Jeong-un made a different choice. He instructed the diviner to conduct a new ritual, one that would extract the seal's location before they decided anything further. Gchan then left the room, since he wasn't supposed to hear the location of the Lord's seal and tome. The diviner, now visibly shaken, began the second ritual. He directed the demonic spirit into a specially prepared vessel, aiming to trick it into believing it had returned to Lord Mok's body. With the spirit momentarily distracted, the diviner commenced the extraction process. Through this ritual, he uncovered the location of both the seal and the secret tome, hidden behind the fourth stone door in the medical ward's basement. As the knowledge surfaced, the ritual became unstable. The spirit began to resist, pressing against the bindings with increased ferocity. The diviner, overwhelmed, conceived a desperate escape. He turned to Gchan and claimed that cutting one of the binding threads would allow the spirit to return briefly to the master's body and bring balance to the ritual. Trusting the instruction, Gchan severed the thread. Instantly, shadowy limbs emerged from the spirit vessel, wrapping around him. Countless undead hands gripped his body, dragging him into the ritual circle. Shock and pain surged through him as he struggled in vain. Across the room, the diviner watched with a twisted grin. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction, believing his plan had succeeded. The evil spirit radiated a murderous intent from the beginning, and by the time it broke free, Gchan had already been caught in its grip. The shaman, seeking to avoid responsibility, decided to place all blame on Gchan and claim the reward promised by the First Lady. He pressed a talisman onto Gchan's forehead to begin the ritual. Inside Gchan's body, the evil spirit stirred in fury. It sought to seize control over his consciousness and plunge him into delusion. As the possession deepened, Gchan found himself standing in a quiet forest. The scene felt familiar. It was the old watering hole he used to visit. He followed his usual routine, filling the wooden bucket and preparing to bring water back home to his grandfather. However, something felt wrong. The air grew tense as he spotted smoke curling through the trees in the direction of his home. Alarmed, he sprinted toward the source, shouting for his grandfather. Upon arrival, he fell to his knees in horror. His grandfather's body had already been cleaved in half. The stillness of death hung in the air. In that moment, Gchan finally understood the depth of his grandfather's purpose and sacrifice. Sadly, the realization had come too late. Behind him, the spirit loomed, observing the memory with quiet satisfaction. It trapped him within the scene, feeding on his despair, and began to push further into his mind, hoping to consume him entirely. However, a voice interrupted the illusion. It was his grandfather, speaking calmly and gently. Gchan snapped out of the trance and looked around in disbelief. Warm tears welled in his eyes as he embraced his grandfather, holding on as though he would never let go again. A flicker of joy crossed his face, though the spirit, watching from the shadows, grew impatient. The spirit inched closer, hoping to resume the possession. Gchan turned and asked his grandfather about the meaning of his name. As the spirit approached, Gchan stared directly into its face. The intensity of his gaze startled even the evil presence. Reaching forward, he gripped the spirit tightly. He calmly told it that he was irritated it had used his grandfather's image so cruelly. The spirit recoiled, stunned that Gchan could even see it. Gchan stated that, if this illusion had been his own creation, it should have focused on him avenging his grandfather's murder. The spirit hesitated, sensing something unnatural within Gchan. Deep inside him, there was a sealed force, a concentration of pure killing intent, a desire so potent that even the spirit trembled. This was not a force a normal human could carry. His grandfather answered his earlier question with a gentle smile. He explained that Gchan was different from others, which was why his name bore the character for righteousness. As those words were spoken, his figure began to fade slowly from the illusion. Panicked, the spirit tore itself free from Gchan's grasp and fled into the deepest recesses of his mind. It found itself surrounded by a calm, flower-filled landscape. In the middle stood a sealed door. The spirit recognized it immediately. Behind that door lay all of Gchan's repressed memories. Driven by curiosity and fear, the spirit attempted to unlock it. Before it could make contact, Gchan reappeared behind it. With a calm expression, he pulled the spirit back and swallowed it whole. Back in the physical world, the shaman turned in confusion. He could not comprehend what had just happened. Gchan had subdued the demonic spirit entirely. He gave it a name, calling it the demonic sage. Inside the inner residence, Myung paced restlessly, his thoughts consumed by worry for Lord Mok. 19 years earlier, he had fought alongside Lord Mok to suppress the pirate uprising. After their victory, Myung pledged his loyalty to Lord Mok and joined the Mok family as an inner hall master. Recently, the First Lady had struck a secret arrangement with him, convincing him to allow a shaman into the manor. Her goal was to uncover the location of a hidden secret tome and the family seal, which she believed would elevate her son's standing. Although he agreed to the request, Myong harbored suspicions. He believed the shaman lacked integrity and intended to manipulate the manor lord to seize the artifacts. Eventually, curiosity overtook him. He decided to check on Lord Mok personally. Inside the main hall, the shaman realized the spirit haunting the lord was not an ordinary presence. This was a high-class evil spirit, one far beyond his control. Jeong, sensing the danger, ordered the spirit to destroy the shaman. The spirit responded instantly, rushing forward with overwhelming force. The shaman raised barriers through his craft, attempting to defend himself, yet fear crept across his face. Even he was stunned that Jeong, a boy, could command such a being. The spirit smirked and unleashed a powerful wave of energy, hurling the shaman across the room. Dark, clawed hands emerged from the spirit's form and gripped the shaman tightly. Desperate, the shaman begged Jeong for release. Jeong refused. The shaman offered an apology, suggesting it was due to betrayal. However, Jeong explained it was because the shaman had uncovered the locations of the secret tome and the seal. From the beginning, Jeong had intended for this outcome. Soon after, Gchan entered and was shocked by the scene before him. The shaman's twisted body lay lifeless. Jeong calmly instructed him to move the corpse. Taking a sword, Jeong then swung it around the chamber, creating marks of a struggle. His plan was simple. Claim the shaman had gone mad and attacked the manor lord, cutting off his arms before Jeong and Gchan arrived to intervene. Gchan objected, explaining that such a tale would only stir suspicion. Jeong responded without words. He stabbed himself in the leg, reasoning that it would support the idea that the shaman also tried to harm the young master. Gchan, stunned, could no longer describe him as merely frightening. The word no longer fits. What stood before him was something far more chilling. At that moment, Myong entered. His eyes widened at the chaos that filled the room. Instantly, he assumed Jeong and Gchan had caused the destruction. Gchan rushed to clarify, stating it was a misunderstanding. Jeong tried to rise and explain but collapsed. Myong turned to Gchan, demanding a proper account. As Gchan looked at Jeong, he noticed the faintest smile on his face. It became clear that everything had been part of Jeong's performance. Later, as a result of this act, Jeong was moved to the medicinal hall. Conveniently, this location was near the rumored resting place of the secret tome and seal. He quietly prepared to investigate during the night. That evening, Gchan visited and handed over a stack of books once owned by the shaman. He had managed to retrieve them moments before the manor guards burned the rest to erase evidence. Curious, Gchan asked why Jeong cared so deeply about those texts. Instead of answering, Jeong told him to look outside. Gchan glanced through the window and saw nothing unusual. However, an unseen spirit lingered silently beyond the frame. Shortly afterward, the First Lady entered the medicinal hall, demanding a word with Jeong. Gchan welcomed the First Lady into the medicinal hall. Jeong immediately recognized her as the First Lady of the Mok family. Even the guards, including Gam, had identified her as the most dangerous figure within the household. Her background from a martial clan and mastery in combat made her formidable. Alongside her martial prowess, she possessed a sharp intellect. Although Jeong acknowledged her presence, he remained lying on the bed. Observing this, Gchan quietly noted that Jeong's performance had exceeded his expectations. Without hesitation, the First Lady struck Jeong directly on his wounded leg. Her guard raised her sword to deter Gchan from interfering. The First Lady quickly deduced that Jeong was the true cause of the recent events. She leaned closer and whispered that she would not be deceived as easily as Master Myong had been. Her tone grew colder as she explained that no competent shaman would ever be possessed during a ritual. With fury, she slapped Jeong and demanded an explanation for what had transpired in the main hall. In response, Jeong remained composed and invoked the presence of the demonic mage. The spirit appeared and instantly subdued the First Lady's guard. She recognized the overwhelming power. It resembled the same dark force that had overwhelmed the shaman earlier. When Jeong mentioned the secret tome and the family seal, tension filled the room. The guard, caught in the mage's grasp, gasped under the force of spiritual pressure. Rather than threaten her further, Jeong proposed a negotiation. He clarified that he had no interest in becoming the head of the family, yet he could influence the future of the clan. Either the second son or even the lowly fourth son could benefit from his decision. He advised the First Lady to reconsider her stance and begin treating him with the respect he now commanded. Later, inside Lady Suk's quarters, the First Lady was overcome with rage. She hurled objects across the room as her anger flared. She felt humiliated after being outwitted so thoroughly by Jeong. All her carefully laid plans had been unraveled. She admitted to herself that her failure stemmed from underestimating him. Ever since the death of Jeong's mother, her side had begun losing power, and now she feared the boy had been concealing his true self all along. Her guard suggested eliminating Jeong before he could cause more trouble. However, the First Lady rejected the idea. Killing him outright would draw suspicion, especially so soon after the disruption in the medicinal hall. Instead, she devised a new plan. She decided to contact the Ghost Shadows, an elusive faction known for their deadly skills and ties to the same sect from which the shaman had originated. By informing them of the shaman's death, she expected them to exact revenge on her behalf. Meanwhile, at midnight, Jeong sat alone in the medicinal hall reading one of the shaman's salvaged books. The pages detailed the transformation of the dead into vengeful spirits, explaining that such entities were born from deep resentment. The strength of each spirit depended on several variables, including the nature of their death and the energy surrounding them. According to the text, there were 3 common types of spirits. The red spirit remained bound to a specific location, often inducing chills or unease. The second type could afflict the human body, causing fatigue or prolonged illness. The third and most dangerous was the yellow spirit, capable of directly ending the life of its host. As Jeong studied further, the demonic mage appeared, announcing that he had found the correct area. Jeong silently observed the spirit and confirmed his suspicion that the mage was a yellow spirit. As he prepared to search for the secret tome and the seal, he reflected on recent discoveries. He had realized that the demonic mage's abilities had not affected the First Lady. Fortunately, they had worked on her maid. This indicated that first-rate martial artists, such as Gam, were resistant to spirit control. However, the same resistance was not present in Gchan. Given this, Jeong began to set his sights on a greater objective. He needed to locate a green spirit, classified as 4th tier. These beings had existed for decades, developed the power to control their environments, and created powerful illusions. They were regarded as extremely dangerous and required immediate exorcism once encountered. With his mind focused and his destination clear, Jeong quietly set out. His next move would bring him closer to uncovering the location of the secret tome and the seal, both of which remained hidden within the shadows of the Mok family. Jeong moved steadily down the narrow steps, descending deeper into the hidden parts of the Mok family estate. The journey underground confirmed what he had already suspected: the secret tome had to be of immense importance if it had been buried this far beneath the manor. His thoughts shifted to Gam, the elite guard. Since the demonic mage's influence would have no effect on him, he needed more leverage if he wished to confront her successfully. Eventually, a single door appeared before him. Upon entry, he discovered a small chamber that branched into 4 separate doorways. According to the information extracted from Lord Mok's corrupted spirit, the contents he sought were hidden behind the 4th door. Jeong advanced through the passageway, which stretched further than expected. While walking, he accidentally stepped on a protruding stone. A mechanism triggered, releasing a massive rock from above. Reacting quickly, he leapt aside only to land on another trap. A barrage of arrows shot toward him, which he managed to deflect using the lantern he carried. As he regained balance, a heavy trunk was released in his direction. He barely dodged it, rolling away across the rough stone floor. The excessive number of traps made him question the true purpose of this place. He began to suspect that the site held more than just a secret tome. Driven by curiosity, he pressed on, eager to uncover the truth. Finally, he arrived at a chamber that appeared different from the rest. Unlike the stone tunnels behind him, this space was structured entirely from wood, with geometric precision. At its center stood a lone table holding a wooden box. Upon opening it, Jeong found 2 aged books nestled inside. According to Gchan, one contained sword techniques while the other held a cultivation method. Jeong collected both, yet an odd sensation crept over him. Something in the room felt misplaced. His eyes scanned the surroundings until they rested on a second, much larger wooden box set against the wall. The chest looked heavy and inactive, though traces on the floor showed it had been dragged to its current position. Driven by instinct, he pushed the box aside and discovered multiple seals etched into the floor. Removing each seal carefully, he found another wooden container hidden beneath. This chest emanated a deeply unsettling aura. When he lifted the lid, he was met with a sight that made him pause. Inside was a book, not of paper or silk, but bound in human skin. Beads and talismans wrapped around its cover, pulsing faintly in the dim light. As soon as he touched it, the lantern in his hand flickered and extinguished, leaving the room in a chilling silence. Above ground, just outside the medicinal hall, Yeonpyeong gathered with his loyal subordinates. A celebration was underway. He spoke with growing confidence about his plans to take control of the Mok family, now that Guard Gam had officially aligned with his cause. His words carried certainty, as if the role of clanhead had already been claimed. At that moment, Gam arrived and offered his greetings. Yeonpyeong organized a modest welcome gathering for Guard Gam. Although he had originally planned a lavish feast, the deteriorating health of Lord Mok forced him to scale down the celebration. Nonetheless, Guard Gam felt honored by the gesture and accepted the recognition with humility. Soon after, Yeonpyeong received news that Jeong had lost his ability to use martial arts. Guard Gam thought to himself that the real Jeong had already died, and the person now bearing his name was an impostor unfamiliar with combat techniques. Despite knowing the truth, Guard Gam chose not to reveal the third master's death. If the truth became public, it would expose his failure in protecting Lord Mok's son and place his own life at risk. In order to eliminate this loose end and secure his loyalty to Yeonpyeong, Guard Gam considered presenting Jeong's severed head as proof of devotion. This revelation pleased Yeonpyeong. He expressed gratitude that someone of Guard Gam's skill and reputation now supported his ambitions. The loss of Jeong's martial abilities was seen as a stroke of fortune. Although curious about how Jeong had lost his skills, Yeonpyeong accepted Guard Gam's vague response. The guard claimed he could not reveal the reason at that moment but assured Yeonpyeong that there was no cause for concern. Yeonpyeong trusted him, aware of his past as a lethal assassin from a notorious organization. However, despite the trust he displayed outwardly, Yeonpyeong still harbored doubts. He dismissed Guard Gam for the time being, telling him to return only if the matter was urgent. Afterward, Yeonpyeong instructed his own men to keep a close watch on Guard Gam. In secret, he ordered a subordinate named Ilsing to visit Jeong and determine whether he truly had lost his martial prowess. To make the test more entertaining, Yeonpyeong directed Ilsing to break Jeong's ankle. Meanwhile, beneath the medicinal hall, Jeong stood before a strange object. His fingers rested on a relic that pulsed with a rhythm closer to death than life. The air around it felt heavy, and he could not understand why such a dangerous thing had been hidden beneath the estate. His curiosity tempted him to undo the rosary wrapping it, eager to inspect the artifact further. Before he could act, the demonic mage materialized. Its presence alone revealed the object's importance. Even the spirit seemed disturbed, trembling as its gaze fixed on the book resting nearby. Jeong recognized the magnitude of what he had found. If a being like the demonic mage bowed before it, then it surely held exceptional power. His thoughts then turned outward. The appearance of the demonic mage often meant someone was lurking nearby. Ilsing, the spy dispatched by Yeonpyeong, had approached the medicinal hall. Although his task was to assess Jeong's strength, he found Gchan stationed outside, guarding the entrance rather than the young master himself. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ilsing crept toward the building. From outside, he peeked through the window and saw Jeong sleeping peacefully. Nothing about the scene seemed suspicious. Slipping silently through the window, he entered the room and approached the table. There, he discovered a manual. The moment he recognized its content, his eyes widened. In the hands of Yeonpyeong, such knowledge could tip the balance of power in his favor. Just as Ilsing reached for the book, Jeong emerged from the shadows behind him. Without hesitation, he seized the intruder's head and slammed it forcefully onto the table. He asked if the man was feeling sleepy, then continued smashing his head against the wood. Blow after blow echoed through the chamber until the guard lost consciousness. Later, Ilsing awoke to find himself hanging upside down beneath the medicinal hall. Ropes dug into his ankles, and the world spun around him. Jeong stood nearby, prepared to begin the interrogation. Before Jeong could take the captured guard underground, Gchan arrived at the medicinal hall. He informed Jeong that the man's name was Jo Ilsing, a personal escort of Yeonpyeong. From the manner in which Jo Ilsing had infiltrated the area, it was clear that his intentions were far from innocent. Jeong lifted the unconscious man and carried him to the hidden basement to begin the interrogation. Gchan pleaded with him to spare the guard, explaining that Yeonpyeong held deep affection for his subordinates. Any harm done to one of them would likely ignite the second master's fury. Despite Gchan's repeated requests, Jeong continued without hesitation. Deep beneath the medicinal hall, Jo Il-sung regained consciousness. His first request was for release. Jeong demanded a reason. Jo Il-sung claimed that he was close to Yeonpyeong and warned that Jeong would bring danger upon himself if he continued. He offered to speak well of Jeong to the second master, suggesting leniency could be granted if he cooperated. Jo Il-sung believed Jeong would be frightened by Yeonpyeong's influence, but he failed to understand who he was dealing with. Jeong was no saint who forgave easily. He was a man shaped by darker resolve. Intrigued by Jo Il-sung's claim about Yeonpyeong's affection for his men, Jeong appeared to consider the offer. He stood, stepped forward, and untied the ropes binding the guard. However, when Jo Il-sung looked down, he noticed one of his fingers was missing. He could not feel the loss, nor could he move properly. Jeong calmly explained the cause. A rare herbal mixture derived from plants within the medicinal hall had been used to create a poison that numbed the body. Jo Il-sung would feel nothing for several hours. Jeong began the interrogation, declaring that for every second of silence, one of Jo Il-sung's fingers would be removed. The first question was simple: why did Yeonpyeong send him? Time passed with no answer. Jeong removed one finger, then another. Jo Il-sung cursed him, yet still withheld the truth. Jeong remained unmoved. In total, 4 fingers were cut off before the guard broke. With blood trailing down his arm, Jo Il-sung confessed. Yeonpyeong had ordered him to confirm whether Jeong had truly lost his martial abilities. Reflecting on the confession, Jeong quickly deduced that Guard Gam had changed allegiances. The speed of betrayal was notable, but not surprising. When asked if Guard Gam had a hand in the scheme, Jo Il-sung nodded in confirmation. Jeong admired the tactic. For someone like Guard Gam, who had once served him, such cunning was expected. Jo Il-sung, shocked by how fast Jeong uncovered the betrayal, began to doubt whether the young man had ever trusted Guard Gam. Jeong asked no further questions. Instead, he stood silently, contemplating what to do next. Realizing his life was nearing its end, Jo Il-sung pleaded for mercy. He offered full loyalty to Jeong and promised to serve him faithfully. He claimed he had never expected such brilliance and was now willing to do anything. Sensing a chance to prove his worth, he begged for a task. Jeong accepted the offer. He declared that there was indeed one task. The price would be Jo Il-sung's life. Without hesitation, Jeong slit the man's throat. Blood spilled freely onto the floor. He collected the blood and poured it over the wooden book he had discovered earlier. After studying the cursed tome, Jeong understood its nature. The seal guarding it was formed of pure energy. According to what he had read in one of the shaman's manuals, such purity could only be weakened by corrupt energy. A tragic death, especially one filled with regret, carried the kind of impurity the book required. Placing the bloodied corpse above the tome, he allowed the blood to flow over the cover. The pages soaked in the crimson pool, and the spell began to respond. The seal, once hidden, now released its grip. Jeong stepped back, observing the transformation. Blood overflowed, spreading across the floor. A low hum of power filled the chamber as the liquid began to rise. It swirled violently before condensing into a shape. A surge of energy blinded him. Silence fell over the space. When Jeong opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar world. Blood covered the land in every direction. Amid the scarlet haze, a woman emerged from the stillness and stepped toward him. Jeong stood in stunned silence. What lay before him was not the power of a 4th-level spirit as he had anticipated. It was something far greater. The presence radiated the unmistakable aura of a 5th-level spirit. According to the book he had studied, these were called blue spirits, entities that had existed for over a century. Though he had expected the possibility of encountering a higher-ranked spirit, the magnitude of this one's energy surpassed his expectations. For a moment, he regarded the situation as a twisted form of gratitude. Yet, in that instant, he felt his knees buckle under the pressure of the spirit's strength. The blue spirit declared its demand, calling for Jeong to offer his soul. He already understood that exorcising or subduing a spirit of this level required the combined strength of at least 10 master shamans. Despite the intensity of the pressure, Jeong slowly forced himself back to his feet. He refused the demand. Although shaken, he remained firm. He began to speak, recounting what he had learned about spirits from the texts he had read. The key to every spirit's existence, he said, was the need for a vessel. Without a body to possess, a spirit's power was severely limited. The blue spirit listened, visibly annoyed by the clarity and accuracy of his explanation. Determined to provoke her, Jeong challenged the spirit to take his body by force if she was able. Her response was immediate. A searing blast of blood energy shot toward him, slamming into his body and sending him crashing to the ground. Blood spilled, and the flesh on his face tore from the force of the impact. Before he could recover, another strike followed. This time, the spirit warned him to stay down and submit. Although severely wounded, Jeong remained conscious. The blue spirit noted his resilience and decided to present him with an offer. If he submitted his soul willingly, she would grant him one wish. Jeong narrowed his eyes, questioning the reason behind such an offer. She explained that it was an acknowledgement of his willpower. If she damaged his body too much, it would become useless as a vessel, making the possession fruitless. When he asked what would happen if he refused, she met him with a cold stare. She would kill him without hesitation and seek another soul to inhabit. Jeong lowered his gaze for a moment and muttered that there was indeed a desire in his heart. The spirit's tone shifted slightly as she pressed him to reveal it. She guessed it might involve betrayal or perhaps the death of a loved one. She even promised to rip the soul of such a person from existence if that was his wish. Jeong, however, responded without hesitation. His desire was simple. He wanted her to be quiet and obediently serve him. The spirit clenched her jaw in rage. Her composure cracked, and she summoned every drop of blood that had saturated the space. The red current surged toward Jeong with crushing force. She declared that his flesh and bones would be shredded until his body became suitable for possession. His limbs refused to move, and consciousness slipped away. Yet even as his body collapsed, his senses remained active. The taste of blood filled his mouth. It was richer than any he had tasted before, more vivid than the deepest carnelian cherry. The metallic flavor was familiar, but unlike the blood he had once known as the Scythe Demon. Back then, blood had warmth. It had trembled with life, vibrating with heat and breath. What he tasted now was the opposite. It was cold, it was death. At that moment, realization struck him. Everything he had seen was an illusion. The crimson world around him fractured. Cracks spread across the bloody landscape until it crumbled into nothing. The spirit reeled in disbelief. She had been deceived. Her power faltered, and a force erupted from Jeong that pushed her backward. The illusion shattered, leaving only silence in its wake. The blue spirit formed a butterfly from blood and directed it toward Jeong. Despite the attack, it caused only minimal damage. As she observed the surroundings, the spirit realized they were now within the realm of transcendence. This realm, known for allowing individuals to escape illusions by severing all five senses, was incredibly difficult to access. Even first-rate shamans rarely succeeded in fully entering it. However, Jeong, who was not even trained as a shaman, had reached this state. The only possible explanation was that Jeong possessed the natural qualities of a master shaman. His innate resilience had pushed him into this elevated realm. As he laughed openly at the spirit, irritation overtook her expression. She warned him that escaping an illusion did not guarantee control of the situation. Jeong responded with a new plan. He presented the spirit with the very book he had acquired after defeating the shaman in the main building. This gesture immediately enraged her. According to that book, older spirits often remain tied to the physical realm through a vessel. In her case, the vessel binding her was none other than the book itself, crafted from human skin. With a fierce grin, Jeong bit into the book and tore it with his teeth. The spirit howled in pain. Her fury deepened as she failed to comprehend how he could damage an object infused with demonic energy. First-rate shamans had previously struggled to seal that very book, enduring repeated failures. Jeong, however, had managed to injure it with nothing more than his teeth. The spirit, now overwhelmed with rage, seized him by the throat and slammed him backward. She declared that she no longer needed his body. Despite the pressure on his neck, Jeong managed a faint laugh. He reminded her that if she could have taken the book, she would have done so already. Her failure to act confirmed that she was incapable of touching it. Though his body was racked with pain, Jeong continued to chew the piece he had bitten off. He noticed that his blood had begun to circulate in reverse, a sensation he recognized from the first time he consumed a poisonous herb. This time, however, the disturbance carried something else. A soul's fury surged within him. Its hatred was directed not at Jeong, but at a much greater force. A desire for revenge gripped the remnants of that soul. Ignoring the spirit's screams, Jeong swallowed the piece of human skin. She tightened her grip around his throat, desperate to stop him, but it was too late. Her fury erupted. Suddenly, the world around him shifted once again. He found himself in an unfamiliar place. A vast ocean of corpses stretched into the distance. At the center stood a kneeling figure. The blue spirit now appeared as a mortal woman, bound to a sword with a cloth, facing a throne. She spoke to the figure seated upon it, though her words were inaudible. Her rage, however, was unmistakable. She charged forward, attempting to strike the figure who resembled a king. The monarch responded effortlessly, piercing her chest and discarding her body like waste. Several masters appeared behind the throne. Each one rushed toward her with drawn knives. Together, they stabbed her repeatedly until her body lay still. As Jeong returned to the present, a voice rang out. A red thread emerged from his chest, its other end connected to the blue spirit. The bond had formed. She was no longer an enemy. She had become a servant spirit, bound to Jeong. A sense of satisfaction settled over him. He had gained control over a fifth-level spirit, a blue spirit that now answered to him. The blue spirit grabbed Jeong's neck once more. However, now that she had become a servant spirit, the pain coursing through his body also reached her. She quickly released him, coughing from the shared torment, then turned away in frustration. Jeong realized that if the spirit was affected by his pain, there was a strong possibility that the demonic mage had also felt something earlier, especially considering he had narrowly escaped death. Meanwhile, the demonic mage's condition seemed far worse, almost as if his existence had been wiped out. Jeong glanced at the spirit and remarked that they should introduce themselves since they would be bound together from now on. He stepped forward and presented himself as Mok Gyeongwoon. He asked for her name, hoping to refer to her properly, yet she offered no reply. Left with no choice, Jeong decided to give her a name of his choosing and called her Red Dung Beetle. The name visibly annoyed her. Sensing her reaction, Jeong guessed she disliked it and asked again for her real name. The spirit, however, declared that she would never share her name with a mere mortal. Since she offered nothing, Jeong gave her another name. This time, he called her Blue, referencing her status as a blue spirit. She made no protest, simply sitting in silence, and appeared to accept it. Jeong decided to stick with that. He noted her pride and concluded he could not force her into obedience. He would have to win her favor through patience and persuasion. Turning to the book made of human skin, Jeong asked Blue about its origin. She dismissed the question, claimed she knew of no such spirit, and walked off, saying she had other matters to attend to. Jeong noticed something peculiar. The book's text was written in blood. He found the combination of human leather and blood-written script morbidly fascinating. However, the symbols made no sense to him. He could not understand their meaning. Blue observed his struggle and chuckled, which only irritated Jeong further. He returned his focus to the book, determined to decipher the symbols. After careful study, he managed to make out a chant. He read aloud, advising not to despair but to rely on the mind of another form. Before nothingness, there must have been form. What seems to be may not actually be. As Jeong continued reading, the surrounding chi began to stir and flow toward him. He recited again that the demon obstructs the way of the good, yet the ultimate blood holds power to reverse all. Suddenly, the book attached itself to his palm, refusing to let go. Blue was stunned by what he had done and questioned whether the book was responsible for what followed. Jeong's veins tightened painfully, sending waves of agony through his body. Blue also began to suffer and immediately instructed him to stop breathing, clear his mind, and think of nothing. Jeong obeyed without hesitation. Gradually, the pressure eased, his veins loosened, and the book fell from his hand. Blue was amazed by how quickly he managed to control himself. The ritual of attachment had been undone. She stared in disbelief. Jeong, who had no formal training in martial arts, had survived a ritual that even experienced shamans struggled with. It seemed miraculous. He, however, remained unaware of the full extent of what he had accomplished. Sitting calmly, he simply enjoyed the feeling of relief. Blue finally broke her silence, explaining that the ritual had nearly gone wrong because Jeong had not controlled it properly. His breathing technique had also been flawed. Jeong smiled, pleased that Blue had finally begun to speak. She responded that she was only acting in self-interest, given how dangerously foolish he had been. Curious, Jeong asked about the ritual of attachment. Blue described it as a method to pull things toward oneself and bind them. It involved bending the nature of energy to one's will. Jeong clutched his stomach, feeling sharp pain. Blue clarified that his chi had been twisted because he was pulling from nothing after severing the connection to the book. This caused his inner flow to collapse. She advised him to practice using the ritual on the guard's corpse instead. She instructed him to focus on the guard's energy core. Since the guard was dead, his chi would have dispersed and could be pulled back gradually. Jeong admitted he knew nothing about energy cores or the related principles. He requested that Blue explain everything. She prepared him to begin. As instructed, Jeong placed his palm beneath the guard's navel and started the chant. Slowly, he began absorbing chi. A warm current of energy flowed into him, circling his core. Blue told him to draw something from it and make it stick. He concentrated as the chi's flow intensified. This, Blue explained, was the true essence of the ritual of attachment. For the first time, Jeong felt what true Kai was like. A warm current of energy wrapped around his torso, confirming what Gchan had described earlier. According to Gchan, gathering chi naturally took time. However, absorbing another person's inner energy accelerated the process, making it possible to grow stronger quickly. Jeong, who possessed the mind of an anti-protagonist, accepted this logic without hesitation. Killing for power did not seem far-fetched. Suddenly, all the energy he had gathered dispersed. Blue explained that chi required a specialized method for storage. Without it, the energy would vanish. Jeong needed a unique internal trait to store absorbed Kai separately from other energies. In essence, the ritual of attachment alone could not store Kai. Jeong felt disappointed. He had believed he had found a shortcut to strength. Blue reminded him that mastering martial arts was never easy. However, the ritual of attachment was only the first among the 8 techniques known as the thought-shattering methods. Mastering just one could lead to endless potential. Blue encouraged him to focus the remaining Kai into his hand through circulation. Jeong admitted he had no idea how to circulate energy. Blue responded patiently, guiding him step by step. She explained that Kai circulation was largely a matter of imagination and visualization. If he could picture the flow correctly, his body would respond. Although Blue doubted Jeong could succeed without any formal training, she was unaware of his unusual nature. Slowly, he directed the energy to his palm. Once it gathered, he struck a nearby pillar. The impact shattered it and even damaged the wall behind it. Blue was stunned. She had seen countless individuals during her existence, but never one like Jeong. Without martial arts training or basic techniques, he had successfully circulated Kai. Jeong, realizing the power behind martial arts, understood why it was so glorified. It offered a simple and efficient means to kill. Impressed by the results, Jeong pressed to learn the second technique. Blue began to explain but abruptly stopped. She remembered her own pride and decided she had already said too much. Reflecting on the situation, she began to understand why older shamans had always been so obsessed with their disciples. Jeong absorbed everything she taught with frightening speed. Jeong wanted to ask about the cold sensation he had felt earlier, something different from the warmth of Kai. Blue, however, had lost interest in speaking and walked away. Left alone, he resolved to uncover the answer on his own. Together, they exited the area beneath the medicinal hall, with Jeong having gained a great deal from the experience. Elsewhere, the guard named Ang Ho, protector of the First Lady, arrived at the Ghost Shadows Pavilion. She stepped inside, where statues of wooden shamans stood ominously. A torch suddenly ignited as she began speaking aloud. She explained that Shi Myo, the shaman, had been killed by Jeong, who she referred to as the third young master. She placed 300 silver nyang in mourning for the death and offered an additional 400 as payment for a new mission, the elimination of Jeong. The torch extinguished. She understood that the request had been accepted and quietly left. Although no one appeared to be present, she had felt dozens of unseen eyes watching her. She would never have entered that place if not for her obligation to carry out the First Lady's will. Inside the pavilion, the leader of the shamans confirmed that Shi Myo's death had indeed been a murder. The others agreed. Based on information they had gathered, the First Lady's guard had been seen floating, a feat possible only through a yellow spirit's power. The shamans speculated that Jeong had been possessed by such a spirit. The leader asked if the yellow spirit could have become a servant spirit. Most dismissed the possibility, stating that a beast of pure spirit could potentially be tamed, but a yellow spirit could not be taken in. The leader concluded that a shaman would be sent to eliminate Jeong and guide the vengeful spirit to rest. Every member in the room supported the decision. The following morning, Gchan yawned, clearly worn from a sleepless night. He complained about running errands for Jeong. He had managed to purchase the requested brazier and now asked what purpose it would serve. Gchan, without much ceremony, revealed the Mok family's secret manuals. He tore out each page and threw them into the brazier. Flames consumed the ancient knowledge. Gchan stood frozen, unable to close his mouth, his eyes wide with disbelief. He could not understand what kind of person would do something so outrageous. Gchan remained silent, watching the fire consume the last remnants of the Mok family's legacy. Gchan stood frozen in disbelief, unable to grasp what he had just witnessed. He questioned what kind of person would destroy such valuable manuals. Although the knowledge might be useless to Gchan, others could benefit from it. Gchan disagreed. That was the exact reason the manuals needed to be destroyed. He intended to ensure that no one else would gain access to the knowledge now etched into his memory. Gchan attempted to reason with him again, still struggling to comprehend the decision. Gchan remained calm and reassured him. The information had already been fully absorbed into his mind. As a final gesture, he suggested delivering one of the manuals to the First Lady in Yeonpyeong. He envisioned them sharing it peacefully, like a family finally aligned in purpose. While Gchan carried out his plan, Gam was beginning his morning routine. His movements remained as sharp and precise as they had been during his days as an assassin. His goal was clear: to retire with honor as an elder of the Yeonmuk family once Yeonpyeong secured dominance. That morning, another guard approached and informed him that his master was requesting his presence. Shortly afterward, Gam left the hall with a fresh wound across his forehead. Yeonpyeong had not held back his rage. Jo Il-sung, a close subordinate, had disappeared after being sent to investigate Gchan's martial capabilities. Gam had personally vouched for Gchan's loss of power. Now, everything seemed uncertain. Yeonpyeong demanded immediate results. In a desperate attempt to buy time, Gam offered his right hand as collateral, securing a mere 4 more hours to resolve the issue. Failure would mean death. He began to understand how deeply the situation had spiraled since the appearance of the false Gchan. If Gchan had truly retained his strength, then the threat was far greater than anticipated. While combing the area, Gam soon spotted Gchan, who had been tasked with keeping watch on Gchan. His presence alone was suspicious. Gam confronted him, his tone sharp and full of mistrust. When he noticed a familiar manual in Gchan's possession, his fury escalated. Without hesitation, he beat him and dragged him by force through the halls. The door to Gchan's room burst open as Gam kicked it wide, flinging Gchan inside with no concern for subtlety. Gchan turned from his seat, his expression composed and unreadable. He welcomed Gam with an air of feigned innocence, as if unaware of the tension filling the room. Guard Gam demanded an explanation. His mood had already soured from the moment he saw Gchan again. Gchan acted unaware, attempting to play innocent. However, Guard Gam made it clear there was no time for games. He reminded Gchan that he had warned him from the beginning: any foolish move would lead to death. With restrained anger, Guard Gam grabbed Gchan by the throat and repeated his warning. Gchan responded calmly, claiming he did not remember any such condition. The guard pressed further, asking about the second son's missing subordinate. Gchan pretended not to know who that was. When questioned directly about harming the guard, he shifted the conversation, stating that Guard Gam himself knew how powerless he had become, especially against an expert martial artist. Guard Gam hesitated. He indeed knew how weak Gchan had seemed and how capable the missing subordinate was. Something about the situation felt off. Gchan pushed further, suggesting that if someone as powerless as him had truly killed the subordinate, then the man standing before Gam now could not be the real third son. Those were the very words Gam had used to justify his loyalty to Yeonpyeong. The realization struck. Guard Gam drew his blade and prepared to strike. Gchan met his gaze with mockery, asking what course he would take now. It was clear that Guard Gam had switched allegiances, and the subordinate had died because of the deception. In a fit of rage, Gam stabbed Gchan repeatedly. Eventually, both of them slumped to the ground, momentarily exhausted. While sitting in silence, Guard Gam began to recount his life. He had been an orphan, raised as an assassin, clawing his way into the Mok family's inner ranks. Years of sacrifice had brought him this far, yet everything was now crumbling. Not only had Gchan impersonated the third son, he had also eliminated Yeonpyeong's trusted subordinate. Gam realized that killing Gchan might be the only way to escape alive. However, a thought crossed his mind. The subordinate was already dead, and there was no undoing that. What remained was the manual he had taken from Gchan. If he could retrieve the full manual, he might offer it to Yeonpyeong and preserve his own life. Gam turned to Jeong and demanded the rest of the manual. Jeong claimed ignorance. Gam warned him to provide a real answer or face death. He offered one final chance: surrender the rest of the manual and live, or die in agony. Jeong appeared to accept the deal. This gave Gam a sense of power, and he extended his hand, expecting the remaining pages. Instead, Jeong placed his own hand in Gam's and declared that he was the manual, having memorized everything. Before Gam could react, Jeong gripped his hand tighter and began absorbing his inner energy through the thoughts-shattering 8 techniques. Gam was stunned, struggling to understand what was happening as his strength began to drain. Realizing the danger, Gam attempted to attack. However, Jeong had already treated him as a test subject. He expressed a twisted gratitude as Gam continued to weaken. In desperation, Gam slashed and stabbed him again and again. Eventually, Jeong lost grip, and Gam kicked him away with brutal force. Though wounded, Gam was exhausted. His left arm had gone numb, the energy in it completely drained. Jeong noted that Gam was indeed a first-rate martial artist. However, lacking the strength to overpower him directly, he had to find another method. Gam refused to accept defeat. He warned that such tricks would not work again and charged with lethal intent. Jeong responded by summoning the demon mage. The creature grabbed Gam's hand, stopping him instantly. Confused, Gam asked how Jeong had managed this. The answer was simple: it was another trick, one of many. With precision, Jeong stabbed Gam using immense force, returning both his dagger and inner energy with a final blow. Blood sprayed as Gam stumbled backward. He realized that the strike had landed in a critical spot. If he removed the blade improperly, the bleeding would become fatal. Jeong had not only absorbed Gam's energy but had also weaponized the demonic mage's force. At last, Gam understood how foolish he had been. Choosing Jeong as a stand-in had cost him everything. Guard Gam had kept a secret weapon prepared, the poison he had fed to Jeong in advance. He had crafted it precisely for a situation like this. Recognizing the escalating danger, he attempted to shift the conflict into negotiation. He offered Jeong an antidote and money, suggesting that he leave quietly. However, something unexpected occurred. Despite his efforts to circulate his chi, Gam began vomiting blood, his condition rapidly worsening. Confusion turned to panic as he realized the poison was now affecting him. Jeong observed the moment calmly, noting that his own injuries were not as severe as they might have seemed. Gam demanded to know what had been done to him. Jeong responded with indifference, remarking that the answer was not significant. When Gam had stabbed him earlier, Jeong's blood had spilled onto the blade. What Gam failed to anticipate was that Jeong's blood was already laced with deadly toxins. Years of consuming poisonous herbs since childhood had transformed it into a potent weapon. Listing the ingredients Gam had used to concoct his own poison, Jeong explained that he had no need for the antidote. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, Gam's body began trembling. Jeong added that he had opened the window intentionally to lower the room's temperature. A colder body would slow the poison's spread, delaying death. In desperation, Gam pleaded for mercy. He swore loyalty to Jeong, offering to serve him, crawl at his feet, and follow any command in exchange for his life. Jeong considered the offer, noting that such a submissive attitude could have made them useful allies. Gam's eyes lit with hope at the words. However, Jeong dismissed the offer, explaining that loyalty forged out of convenience was meaningless. A man who changed sides to suit his survival could never be trusted. Deciding that Gam was better off dead, Jeong plunged a blade into his heart. The act marked Jeong's first time killing a first-rate martial artist. There was a thrill to the moment, something dark and cold that lingered within him. He stood and brushed himself off, having ended the fight sooner than expected. Turning his gaze toward Gchan, Jeong considered whether the boy should also die. However, he recalled that Gchan had never revealed the secret about the manual's destruction, even after being beaten. This loyalty earned Gchan a reprieve. He called for Gchan to rise. When Gchan asked how Jeong knew he was awake, Jeong explained that he had noticed small movements, likely made in fear of being stepped on during the fight. Appreciating the discretion, Jeong commended him for keeping their secret. Gchan responded with a humble smile. Jeong then ordered him to send the others away so he could deal with Gam's body alone. Using the ritual of attachment, Jeong focused on the energy within the corpse. Though he felt the lingering warmth of inner energy, it offered him no benefit. What he sought was the chilling force he had sensed beneath the pavilion, the death kai. Once the warmth faded, he began to feel that cold energy again. Unlike the previous type, this one did not scatter. He concluded that to gather more of this death Kai, he would need to kill again. From the side, Blue observed with the demon mage. She commented to the creature that now she understood why it remained bound to Jeong. He was no ordinary person. He was something else entirely, a monster. Meanwhile, at the pavilion of Yenpyeong, guard Yangkyeon reported to him that guard Gam had not lied. Yenpyeong acknowledged this fact, explaining that people treated kindly from the start often grew entitled. Therefore, he had chosen to be strict. Once he eventually showed mercy, Gam would remain loyal. Yenpyeong believed cruelty should precede kindness to ensure obedience. The guard now saw the wisdom in his master's methods and understood that this had been a test of loyalty. A new report arrived. A guard informed Yenpyeong that guard Gam had attempted to kill the third master. More troubling, the third master had publicly declared that Yenpyeong was behind the assassination attempt. Yenpyeong froze in shock. His eyes burned with fury as he processed the accusation. Jeong had named him during the investigation, claiming that Yenpyeong had ordered the hit through guard Gam. Guard Yangkyeong demanded to know guard Gam's whereabouts. The responding guard informed him that Gam had vanished after the failed assassination attempt. Enraged, Yenpyeong unsheathed his sword, preparing to strike down Jeong in retaliation. Yangkyeong quickly intervened, warning that acting impulsively would only give more credibility to Jeong's testimony. Yenpyeong initially resisted the advice, concerned that Jeong might mock him for showing restraint. However, Yangkyeong urged him to consider a more strategic alternative. Yangkyeong reminded him that Jeong had testified during the outer chamber investigation, claiming that guard Gam had attacked him. Rather than retaliate personally, they could exploit the rules of the organization Gam once belonged to. That group, known as the Flying Death School, held strict codes. Regardless of retirement, any assassin who failed a mission faced death as punishment. There were no exceptions. Yangkyeong proposed contacting the organization and relaying the situation to them directly. Yenpyeong's anger shifted to satisfaction at the mention of the Flying Death School. He saw an opportunity to eliminate Jeong without raising suspicion or damaging his reputation further. Elsewhere, inside the Mok family residence, Jeong attempted to construct a Kai center using the secret manual's instructions. Although he managed to circulate his internal energy briefly, it would always dissipate before taking hold. Frustrated, he called for Gchan and described the issue. Gchan, who had believed Jeong to be entirely ignorant of martial arts just the day before, could hardly believe the progress. The notion that Jeong had awakened his chi circulation in a single night sounded absurd. Still, he kept his thoughts to himself and offered to examine the flow firsthand. As they sat down, Gchan politely requested that Jeong ignore any awkward reactions from him. The moment Gchan touched his chi, he was stunned. Jeong's meridians were completely clear, without even a trace of blockages or impurities. Such a state could only be achieved through intense, expert training. Gchan recognized immediately that Jeong possessed the natural talent of a prodigy. However, he also sensed something unusual. A cold, disturbing energy nestled deep near the Kai center. Before he could process it further, the flow shattered. Jeong demanded an explanation. Gchan admitted he felt an unfamiliar force near the chi center, one he could not define. Jeong theorized that this cold energy might be the problem and began to believe he would never master martial arts. Gchan clarified that the cold energy seemed to repel the warm flow of life chi. Its nature felt entirely opposite, as though born of death rather than life. Upon hearing this, Jeong concluded that the energy resembled death Kai. He then declared that he would attempt to circulate his chi in reverse. Gchan immediately moved to stop him. However, Blue intervened, grabbing his arm and hissing for silence. She knew that Jeong was treading on dangerous ground. If a familiar killed their contractor, both would suffer the consequences. However, if the contractor perished through his own actions, the spiritual bond would break without penalty. She whispered to the demon mage that, once free, she would not hesitate to destroy Jeong when he crossed into the spirit realm. Meanwhile, within the First Lady's chamber, a shaman from the ghost shadows arrived. Her name was Sak. The First Lady, expecting little, found herself intrigued when the young shaman revealed she had brought the corpse of her junior, Shin Mayo. This detail confirmed Sak's higher status. Sak explained that she had come to trace Shin Mayo's killer and declared with certainty that the third young master must die. The First Lady, initially skeptical, found herself impressed by Sak's resolve and began to appreciate her presence. The shaman then began her ritual. Shin Mao's eyes and mouth opened, lifeless yet responsive. Sak chanted while stabbing into the body, channeling energy with precision. Suddenly, pale, skeletal hands burst from Shin Mao's mouth and eyes. These limbs moved with singular intent, seeking their target. From afar, Blue felt the surge of energy from the ritual. In an instant, the ghostly hands tore through the manor, smashing into Jeong's chamber. Demon Mage moved swiftly, blocking the incoming assault of spectral hands. Despite his strength, the sheer number of them forced him backward. Blue recognized the spell immediately. It was a technique known as Reverse Spirit, designed to inflict pain on a target by attacking a proxy. In this case, the suffering inflicted on Shin Mao was intended to be mirrored onto Jeong. The First Lady watched with a twisted sense of satisfaction. She believed that each stab into Shin Mao's body translated into pain for Jeong. However, the actual situation inside the room was far from what she imagined. Blue, unwilling to allow another force to interfere with her chosen prey, reacted decisively. Sensing the interference of a lesser being, she struck back with overwhelming power. In one sweeping blow, she shredded all the spectral hands and instantly located the shaman's position. Without hesitation, she unleashed her fury, tearing through the spiritual links and launching the shaman across the courtyard. The shaman, now bleeding and shaken, realized the ritual had failed. She had underestimated her opponent. Clearly, a spirit stronger than a yellow rank one was present in the room. Sak demanded additional compensation. She claimed the current price did not cover the level of danger she now faced. The First Lady asked for clarification, unsure why more payment was required. Sak calmly stated that she needed at least 1,000 silver niangs for a mission involving a high-ranking evil spirit. The First Lady's guard objected, arguing that 400 silver niangs had already been paid, enough to buy a considerable amount of rice. Sak clarified that confronting such a powerful spirit risked her life. Even yellow spirits posed a threat to human lives, and the force she encountered was far more dangerous. Most shamans could not handle entities above the yellow rank unless they were as skilled as her. The First Lady finally agreed to the new terms. In exchange for the additional payment, Sak was to ensure Jeong's death. Shamans, like spirits, were ranked in tiers: Divine Sun, Moon, Talent, Darkness, and Porter, from highest to lowest. Shin Mao had held a lower rank, while Sak was of the Talent rank, 2 levels higher. She was also one of the 3 shamans permitted to control Ime Mangryang's servant spirits within the Ghost Shadows Padova. Confident in her abilities, Sak guaranteed that Jeong would not survive. Back inside Jeong's room, Blue remained irritated by Sak's interference. If the shaman succeeded, Jeong would die at someone else's hand, which could also jeopardize her connection to him. However, she sensed something beyond normal comprehension. Both Death Kai and Life Kai flowed within Jeong, an impossibility for a living human. The realization struck her hard. Jeong had grasped the ritual of attachment almost instantly. Despite having no formal training in martial arts, he had learned how to circulate his inner energy on his own. Now, he was somehow generating Death Kai while still alive. Though reluctant to admit it, Blue was beginning to develop a grudging admiration for him. Jeong stirred awake, clarity settling over him. He now understood how to circulate his energy properly. This time, the chi did not disperse as before. However, he lacked the quantity needed to form a stable energy core. Looking around, he asked about the state of the room and noticed that Demon Mage appeared weakened. More confusing was the sight of Gchan collapsing on the ground. Blue casually suggested that Gchan might simply be sleeping. Demon Mage, now fully conscious, quickly explained the real reason for Gchan's condition. His explanation was cut short when Blue delivered a sharp kick, punishing him for revealing too much to Jeong. Their attention quickly shifted when a strange sound echoed from outside. Jeong asked for a status update. Blue, now alert, warned him not to lower his guard. Moments later, an overwhelming number of beetles crawled into the room, their movements coordinated and unnatural. Disgust flickered across Blue's face as she identified them. These beetles were not ordinary insects but spiritual entities. She named them Gyo, spirit creatures born from the mountains. Specifically, they were a species of Ime Mangryang spirits native to Yoya Mountain. The mountain-dwelling spirits were known as Ime, while those originating from the sea were called Mangryang. For generations, people referred to destructive spirits causing chaos as Ime Mangryang. One of these fearsome entities was the Gyo. Sak released the Gyo, a creature resembling a bird with the tail of a serpent. It called forth swarms of insects to unleash devastation. The Gyo, with its venomous nature and uncontrollable hunger, posed a deadly threat. Although shamans held no kinship with one another, Sak felt genuine anger over Shin Mayo's death at the hands of a dark spirit. To avenge him, she intended to turn Jeong into nothing more than food for her summoned beast. Inside the room, Gchan slept unaware of the growing danger. Jeong slapped him awake, prompting immediate panic as Gchan opened his eyes to find the room crawling with insects. Jeong instructed him to destroy the invaders. However, when Gchan reached out, even the briefest contact with the insects left his hand foul and crawling with filth. Jeong reminded him to reinforce his body with inner energy. Though the bugs were small, their sheer numbers made it clear that it would only take moments before they consumed both of them. Blue, watching from the side, asked what Jeong planned to do. Without action, they would both become insect feed. Jeong turned to her for help. In response, she questioned what she would gain from assisting him. He reminded her of her place as a servant spirit and wondered why she was resisting. She responded by proposing a wager. If Jeong reached the brink of death, she would claim his body. However, if he managed to survive this ordeal, she would offer him her full support going forward. He accepted the terms. With no room left to stand safely, both he and Gchan rose to their feet, insects flooding the floor around them. Jeong devised a plan to ignite the area and kill the bugs using fire. He pointed to a lantern on the table and instructed Gchan that it could be their only salvation. The problem was the lantern's distance, too far for a safe reach. In response, Jeong used the ritual of attachment to pull it toward him. Gchan, stunned, could not understand how he managed such a feat. Jeong began to consider who might be behind the current attack. He concluded it had to be the First Lady, reasoning that the shaman was likely nearby and aligned with her. Setting the place ablaze would create enough confusion to confront and eliminate the summoner. However, before the fire could spread, the shaman arrived. She halted the flames effortlessly. With calm authority, she declared that childish tricks like fire would never work against someone of her level. Her right eye, known as the white eye, allowed her to perceive what others could not. From her vantage, she had already seen through the walls and discerned Jeong's intentions. The shaman called upon Gyo, shattering the wall with force, and stepped confidently into the room. Jeong welcomed her appearance as an opportunity, though she immediately noticed the red threads that connected him to his servant spirits. Demon Mage was already positioned for an ambush, but before he could strike, she began a chant. Her spell crushed him into the ground, leaving him immobilized. She stepped on his back without hesitation, claiming she could easily identify his form. Gchan lunged forward without fear, refusing to retreat. Despite her being a shaman of talent rank, he did not hesitate. Yet the shaman unleashed another curse. Its force blasted Gchan across the room, and the knife he carried slipped from his grip. The blade spun through the air toward Jeong, who caught it cleanly. The shaman issued a command to Gyo. Immediately, the insects swarmed toward Jeong with renewed hunger. He stumbled back as they surged forward, threatening to overwhelm him. She coldly announced that he should prepare to cross into the spirit realm, for death was imminent. The bugs closed in completely, surrounding Jeong in a thick, writhing mass. Within seconds, his figure vanished from sight beneath the tide of crawling bodies. Everyone present had fallen under the shaman's spell, left immobilized without resistance. Initially, the shaman believed she was dealing with a high-level evil spirit. However, she dismissed the idea as nothing more than her imagination. With Gyo returning to her side, she praised it for its efforts, considering their mission complete. Together, they prepared to leave, although the shaman still felt the commission had been insufficient. Just as she turned to go, an unsettling chill passed through her. Jeong, who had appeared completely subdued, suddenly stood up. Blood began flowing as he stabbed himself deliberately, letting it pour freely. The shaman turned in disbelief while Jeong splashed his poisoned blood over his own body and onto the surrounding insects. The bugs, unable to withstand the toxicity, withered and died instantly. Horrified, the shaman watched as Jeong drove a spike into his own palm and poured the streaming blood over his head. His blood, long infused with poison, acted as a lethal pesticide. The scene before her was terrifying. Jeong no longer resembled a human being. His presence now resembled that of a demon rising from the depths of hell. The shaman instinctively stepped back as he advanced, declaring his blood was not only deadly but useful as a weapon. Panicked, the shaman ordered Gyo to buy time while she prepared a stronger spell. She immediately began casting one of the 8 techniques. In response, Jeong activated the ritual of attachment, pulling Gyo directly into his grasp. The shaman froze in shock while Jeong calmly remarked on the newfound silence. She turned to flee, only to be overwhelmed by a piercing sensation. The pain she felt was not her own but came through the bond she shared with Gyo. At that moment, she realized Jeong was absorbing death Kai directly from Gyo. This was something no living person should have been capable of. The amount of death Kai within the spirit exceeded anything found in a dying human, enough to form a complete energy core. The shaman begged him to stop, pleading that any further drain would kill the spirit. She was helpless as the very energy that made her craft possible slipped from her grasp. Meanwhile, at the residence of the First Lady, her guard suggested moving inside due to the cold, yet she refused. With the situation still uncertain, she chose to remain outdoors. She had made 2 specific requests to the ghost shadows. One was Jeong's death while the other was the acquisition of the secret manuals to prevent others from obtaining them. The guard reported that the shaman was returning, and there was already a growing belief that the mission had succeeded. Many assumed Jeong was dead. The First Lady began to imagine the manuals falling into her hands and her son finally ascending as the new head of the Mok family. Her maids offered early congratulations, but she quickly silenced them, not yet ready to celebrate. The shaman came into view, though she stopped abruptly before reaching the residence. The First Lady demanded an explanation. In response, the shaman, now visibly conflicted, delivered a message that stunned everyone. The ghost shadows, despite their efforts, had failed to eliminate the 3rd young master. The shaman, still shaken, reflected on the cruelty of Jeong, who had forced her into this position. Earlier, Jeong had confronted her with a final command. To protect Gyo, she had to speak out herself and declare the First Lady responsible for the assassination attempt. He predicted that even if Sak was defeated, the ghost shadows would continue sending agents. By turning them against the First Lady, he could disrupt their alliance. It was a strategic move meant to dismantle their cooperation. Now, returning to the present, the shaman publicly declared that the First Lady had ordered the ghost shadows to kill the 3rd young master, claiming he was possessed by a mystical being. However, after thorough examination, no such possession had been found. She urged the First Lady never to request such a task from the ghost shadows again. The crowd began murmuring, eyes turning toward the First Lady. Whispers spread rapidly. The head guard issued an order to head immediately to her residence. Her guard informed her that officials from the outer chamber were approaching quickly. The First Lady stood frozen. Fear overwhelmed her as the consequences of her schemes closed in. She could neither move nor speak, gripped entirely by the weight of her failure. Sak entered the 3rd master's residence, where Jeong calmly asked if she had done as instructed. She confirmed the mission was completed. In her mind, she acknowledged that everything had unfolded according to Jeong's plan. Now, the First Lady and the Ghost Shadows Pavoda were at odds. The First Lady had become a villain in the public eye for attempting to murder the 3rd son. However, the Ghost Shadows had little concern for her situation. What mattered more was that the shaman had betrayed the Ghost Shadows to protect her spirit. That betrayal meant the Ghost Shadows would never stop pursuing her. She requested that Jeong return her spirit. Before answering, he asked her about the Ime Mangryang and the people capable of controlling the spirits. While holding the bird-headed spirit in one hand and the demon mage by his side, Jeong pressed for more details. The shaman realized he had never been possessed. She was further astonished by the demon mage, a resentful spirit bound as a servant. It was rare, nearly impossible, for someone to tame such a spirit, yet Jeong had done so. On top of that, he had another servant spirit. When he asked if she would answer or not, the shaman began to explain. The Ime Mangryang were divided into 6 ranks: cursed, paranormal, impish, demonic, eternal, and divine. A cursed spirit was considered a small-scale disaster. The higher the rank, the more devastating the entity. Within the Ghost Shadows, only 3 people, including herself, had the ability to command such beings. One of them was Go, an aide to the family head, who controlled a paranormal spirit from Nogo Mountain named Gojo. Although she didn't know the full extent of that spirit's power, she acknowledged its danger. The third was the master of the Ghost Shadows. While she had no idea what type of Ime Mangryang he commanded, she believed it to be of an even higher grade. Jeong speculated that it must be either a sacred or divine beast. The shaman disagreed. Beasts of those ranks only existed in ancient legends. Very few stories spoke of people binding sacred beasts as servant spirits. She then handed him a book containing everything she knew about the Ime Mangryang. Jeong contemplated how much death Kai a higher-ranked spirit would possess, considering even a lesser mountain-piercing beast had given him enough to form an energy core. He thanked the shaman for the book and returned her spirit. When she failed to express gratitude, he prompted her to say it properly. She complied, and he allowed her to leave. Gchan, who had been observing everything, found Jeong's behavior irritating. Once the shaman was gone, Jeong reflected on his fortune. With the First Lady under scrutiny from the outer hall and the amount of death Kai he had acquired, no one could touch him. At last, he would be able to cultivate martial arts properly. Gchan asked whether it was wise to let the shaman leave, given that she might hold a grudge. Jeong replied that a promise must be honored. When Gchan pushed the issue further, Jeong agreed that the shaman might seek revenge. He then turned to Blue and reminded her of the promise she made earlier. Meanwhile, the shaman wandered through the mountain, still stunned that her spirit had survived after losing nearly all its death Kai. Her thoughts quickly shifted to revenge. Suddenly, Blue's voice echoed through the air, warning her that seeking revenge was unwise. The shaman immediately recognized the presence. It was the same feeling she had experienced during the reverse murder spell. She recoiled in fear. The realization that someone had bound a blue spirit as a servant was overwhelming. Blue materialized upside down in front of her and took one of her eyes. With eerie calmness, Blue remarked that she still looked beautiful, even with one eye missing. Moments later, Blue ended the life of the talent-ranked shaman. At the residence of the First Lady, chaos was escalating. She pounded her desk in frustration while pleading her case to Sir Sang of the Outer Hall. She claimed Jeong and the shaman had conspired to frame her. Sir Sang dismissed her accusations and asked about the incident she caused at the medicinal hall. She insisted it stemmed from Jeong entering Lord Mok's chamber against her instructions. Sir Sang interrupted and explained that Jeong had done so to save Lord Mok's life. He then questioned whether she had tried to kill Lord Mok herself. Despite her shouting, Sir Sang remained composed and stated that he would not ignore the incident. A full investigation would follow, covering her, Yunpyeong, and Jeong. After she left, Sir Sang remained deep in thought. He couldn't understand the motive behind the attacks. It would have made more sense if they had targeted the fourth son, who was Lord Mok's favorite. Jeong had no outstanding achievements, no lineage advantage, and no martial skill. Despite this, the attempts on his life continued. Sir Sang noted that Jeong had changed. Once arrogant to anyone who showed deference, he now carried himself differently. Determined to uncover the truth, Sir Sang resolved to investigate Jeong personally. Jeong sat cross-legged, circulating his inner energy. Blue appeared nearby, curious about his progress. She observed in silence as he attempted to form an energy core using the death chi he had absorbed from the spirit. The notion intrigued her. It was not every day someone tried to forge an energy core through such an unusual source. She examined him more closely, quietly admitting to herself that he looked striking at that moment. Jeong opened his eyes and asked what she was doing. Caught off guard, Blue turned away, claiming she had nothing to say. He pressed again, skeptical of her answer, yet she avoided the topic and told him to continue his cultivation. He explained that he needed her help to verify whether what he had formed was truly an energy core. Blue, maintaining her pride, responded that creating an energy core in a single day was unrealistic. Jeong revealed the condensed sphere of energy to her and asked if it qualified. She was stunned and requested permission to examine it. He allowed her to proceed and asked what she intended to do. She explained that by placing her hand on the energy core, she could confirm its authenticity. Despite multiple attempts, she failed to interact with it properly. Frustrated, she stated that her hand should be able to pass through the core. She called for Demon Mage to try instead, but the result remained unchanged. Suspecting the issue might lie with her, she attempted the same on Gchan. This time, her hand entered his energy flow, causing him to collapse in pain. She concluded that the problem was not on her side. A knock sounded at the door. Standing there was none other than Sir Sang, the outer hall master. Jeong wondered what business brought someone of such authority to his room. Sang, a long-serving and loyal figure within the Yunmuk family, was respected by both elders and peers. Many believed that the person who earned his support would become the next patriarch. With considerable influence, he entered Jeong's room with calm assurance. Jeong politely asked the reason for his visit. Sang began by apologizing for failing to protect him during the recent incident. Jeong responded with grace, stating he was unharmed. As Sang approached, he reached out a hand and paused briefly, then expressed his relief at seeing Jeong in good health. He inquired about the dagger he had supposedly given to Jeong. Confused, Jeong checked on Gchan, who remained unconscious, then replied that he might have stored it in the drawer. Sang appeared satisfied and mentioned he had worried the dagger had been lost. Jeong hesitated and stated that he did not recall receiving a dagger at all. Sang revealed that was because he had never given him one. Without warning, Sang attacked. Reacting instantly, Jeong leapt into the air. Sang began sealing his acupoints one after another, explaining that Jeong had made two critical errors. The first was his consistent arrogance toward those who acted submissively. The second was his reaction to confrontation. After being beaten by the fourth master, he flinched whenever someone approached aggressively. However, this time he had remained calm. That, according to Sang, proved he was not the same person. Sang declared that Jeong's movements should now be completely sealed. He demanded to know the truth about the third young master. In response, Jeong smiled and moved with speed, despite the blocked acupoints. Startled, Sang watched as Blue emerged and seized his heart. She chastised him for his recklessness and acknowledged his bravery as foolishness. She recognized the nature of the energy within Jeong. Since life energy and death chi were fundamentally opposed, the life energy Sang used to block Jeong's meridians had simply dispersed. This confirmed that Jeong had successfully formed an energy core unlike any other, one immune to traditional martial sealing techniques. Blue warned him that his identity had now been exposed. He would no longer be able to remain in the manor unnoticed. Jeong understood the gravity of the situation. Despite his strength, he could not kill Sang directly due to the man's status in the outer hall. A new plan quickly formed in his mind. He instructed Demon Mage to possess Sang. Blue watched the unfolding action and muttered that Jeong truly was a demon in human form. As Demon Mage's energy crept into Sang's body, the outer hall master began to panic. Confused and terrified, he asked who Jeong truly was. With steady eyes and a calm voice, Jeong responded. He was the third young master of the Mok family. Morning arrived as the sun rose, and Gchan woke up not long after. On his way to Jeong's room, he noticed that everyone greeted him with an unusual formality. Confused, he opened the door and was stunned to find Sir Sang, the outer hall master, standing inside. Jeong calmly instructed Sang to leave, and Sang nodded respectfully to Gchan before exiting. Jeong mentioned that Sang had arrived just in time for breakfast. Gchan, still trying to grasp the situation, asked how any of this was possible. Jeong said he would explain later but had something important to ask first. He requested that Gchan teach him the basic techniques of the Mok family. Gchan was taken aback. Earlier, Jeong had tried replicating movements from the secret manual, following the instructions precisely. Despite his effort, the forms did not connect fluidly. Blue had observed this and identified the techniques as transcendent martial arts. Each movement contained an embedded principle of ascension, concentrated insights that pushed the user toward a higher realm of mastery. Although that sounded beneficial, Blue warned that such arts were meaningless without a foundation. Transcendent martial arts were intended to break limits, yet without fundamentals, they remained unusable. Back in the present, Jeong explained this dilemma to Gchan. The techniques in the secret manual could not be learned without mastering the basics. Gchan hesitated and asked if Jeong aimed to become Lord Mok. Jeong clarified that it was only to defend himself. Gchan apologized, explaining that he could not teach the fundamentals. Those techniques had been passed down strictly to legitimate heirs of the Mok family. Only Lord Mok and the young masters had ever received such instruction. That meant only direct successors could learn them. Jeong questioned him again, piecing together that the other young masters seemed antagonistic toward him. There was a real risk that his identity as a stand-in could be exposed. Rising to his feet, he declared there was only one person who could teach him the basics. Gchan asked who they were going to meet. His expression turned to disbelief when he saw the fourth young master, Yuqian. As they approached, Gchan urged Jeong to stop. He reminded him that he and Yuqian were never on good terms. Jeong acknowledged the warning but pressed forward. Gchan vividly recalled the day when the third young master had begged Yuqian to stop beating him. On that day, Jeong's legs and several ribs had been broken, and he had cried for mercy. Yuqian despised his younger brother. More importantly, he had reached the ascendant stage of cultivation by the age of 16. Martial progression followed a strict hierarchy: third rate, second rate, first rate, ascendant, transcendent, zenith, profound, and nirvana. Lu noted that someone like Yuqian, who possessed such vibrant young energy at a tender age, was rare enough to be called a genius. She even remarked that if she were alive, she would have taken him as a disciple. However, she cautioned Jeong to tread carefully, since her powers were limited during daylight. Meanwhile, Gchan urged Jeong to give up the idea of pursuing the secret manual and instead focus on simpler goals. Jeong ignored the advice and continued toward Yuqian. The fourth young master sat deep in meditation. Upon noticing Jeong, his calm expression shifted to one of disdain. He radiated hatred but remained silent. Jeong offered a casual greeting, which Yuqian ignored, choosing instead to resume his workout. His interest, however, peaked when he spotted the secret manual in Jeong's hands. Jeong asked whether Yuqian wanted the manual. Yuqian questioned how he could know whether it was genuine. In response, Jeong tossed the book toward him. As Yuqian skimmed the contents, he confirmed the manual held true principles of ascension. However, he noticed several missing pages and demanded to know their whereabouts. Jeong responded that the missing contents were memorized. Yuqian then asked how he had obtained the manual. Jeong dismissed the question as irrelevant. Yuqian, enraged, accused Jeong of mocking him. He yelled, questioning his motives. Jeong reassured him that he had no desire for Lord Mok's position and advised him not to jump to conclusions. Unconvinced, Yuqian lashed out. He struck Jeong with a powerful punch that sent him flying across the training yard. Yuqian accused him of deception and declared that he would make him remember the incident from 2 years ago. Despite the blow, Jeong remained composed. He felt no resentment. Instead, he quietly noted that the punch of someone at a peak cultivation level was indeed an experience he had not felt before. Although the man with the dark sword was beyond comparison, Jeong had encountered other skilled martial artists such as Guard Gam and the Outer Hall Master. This gave him a clear understanding of why Gchan kept praising Yuqian. The fourth young master was indeed a monstrous talent. Jeong recognized that such strength could not be attained through luck alone. His current reaction time was no match for Yuqian's, yet he believed that if he could learn martial arts, he might one day reach a level where he could avenge his grandfather. After receiving another powerful strike, Jeong acknowledged that Yuqian's punch was solid. Yuqian, still irritated, moved forward to attack again. Jeong questioned his complete lack of trust. Yuqian admitted openly that he had none and grabbed Jeong's collar with the intent to strike once more. Remaining calm, Jeong stated that if he had no choice, he would have to hand the secret manual to either the First Lady or Yunpyeong. He pointed out that if either of them became Lord Mok, Yuqian would never know peace. As the favored successor of Lord Mok, Yuqian would become a target. This statement provoked more anger from Yuqian, who took it as a threat. Jeong, however, explained that it was simply the truth. Whether Yuqian accepted the opportunity or not was entirely his decision. After a moment of silent observation, Yuqian asked the question lingering in his mind. He wanted to know who Jeong really was and doubted whether he was truly Gyeongwoon. The question shocked Gchan, but Jeong responded with indifference, prompting Yuqian to flinch slightly. Jeong challenged Yuqian's knowledge, asking whether he truly understood anything about him beyond what he had just described. Yuqian insisted that he knew everything: how he had humiliated Gyeongwoon 2 years ago, how Jeong had been too afraid to stand his ground, and how he had always run away at the sight of him. Jeong, unaffected by the past, asked deeper questions. He wanted to know if Yuqian understood what Jeong liked or hated, what he was currently thinking, or why he had no desire to become Lord Mok. Yuqian found himself unable to answer. Instead, he demanded to know what Jeong knew about him. In frustration, Yuqian explained how he had been treated as an inferior son, how others avoided him, and how he had trained alone for years. He asked why Jeong chose him over someone else for this negotiation. Jeong responded without hesitation: there was no one better than Yuqian. Those words struck deeply. Yuqian had endured years of loneliness and rejection. He had trained endlessly just for recognition, though he never expected it to come from Jeong. Until that moment, he had assumed Jeong hated him for what happened 2 years ago. Feeling acknowledged for the first time, Yuqian's hostility faded. He expressed interest in the negotiation Jeong had proposed. From that point forward, Yuqian found himself drawn into Jeong-un's plans. Later, Jeong-un and Gchan returned to their residence. Gchan was left speechless, overwhelmed by how cleverly Jeong-un had managed the situation. He had been unsure how to approach Yuqian, yet Jeong-un had already surpassed his expectations. Earlier, Jeong-un had devised a plan, aware that the real Jang-won possessed basic martial arts skills. He presented Yuqian with 3 conditions. First, Yuqian must promise never to harm him, even if he became Lord Mok. Second, he must provide financial support. Both were accepted easily. The third condition was the most important. Yuqian must teach Jeong-un the fundamental martial arts of the Mok family. Gchan feared this would arouse suspicion. However, Yuqian believed that Jang-won had simply forgotten the basics and agreed to teach him without hesitation. In time, Yuqian taught Jeong-un the fundamentals, unaware that Jeong-un had memorized the entire secret manual after hearing it only once. Even Yuqian, a martial genius, had taken over 4 hours to fully grasp it. Gchan felt fortunate to have ended up with Jeong-un, despite his initial doubts. He admitted being impressed by how calculated the plan had been, though he considered it unfortunate that Jeong-un gave away the manual. Jeong-un clarified that he had not taught the manual in its original form. Every 13 or 14 characters, he had made subtle alterations. Although he feared being caught, he succeeded in misleading Yuqian. Gchan, alarmed, warned that if Yuqian practiced incorrect martial arts, it could lead to a chi deviation and even death. Jeong-un remained unmoved. To Gchan, this indifference confirmed that Jeong-un was truly a devil. Elsewhere, within the ghost shadows, a shaman named Go sat in meditation. The leader expressed frustration, having received no report from Sak. He suspected her failure to complete the mission and believed she had even betrayed the First Lady by exposing her. This betrayal had severed the relationship between the ghost shadows and the First Lady. To reclaim their reputation, the leader summoned his trusted disciple. He tasked Go with uncovering the truth and restoring the ghost shadow's name. Go accepted the mission without hesitation. At the location where Sak had vanished, Go arrived to investigate. He discovered a half-burnt talisman on the ground, a disturbing sign considering Sak was one of the most powerful shamans among the ghost shadows. The scene felt wrong. Go sensed something deeper and used shamanic techniques to trace the events that had taken place there. Through his spiritual perception, he saw the moment Sak entered the area. The next sensation overwhelmed him. He felt the presence of blue. Recognizing the type of spirit that had appeared, Go understood he was dealing with a blue-class spirit. He realized that he would need to prepare carefully before proceeding any further. At Jeong-un's residence, Blue observed as he continued training. Each movement followed the secret manual with surprising precision. Rather than progressing from simple basics, Jeong-un performed advanced techniques with flawless accuracy. Aside from his first attempt, none of his forms showed even minor mistakes. With time and physical conditioning, he only needed to build his strength through training. Blue quietly admired the discipline he showed. In her thoughts, she assumed Jeong-un would eventually beg her to teach him more. Her thoughts briefly drifted into inappropriate territory, causing her to snap back and scratch her head in frustration at herself. Soon after, Gchan arrived, summoned by Jeong-un for a task. Jeong-un handed him a slip of paper with instructions to deliver it to an intelligence organization. Gchan followed the order and visited a group known as the Eternal Orchid. While they were not among the most competent informants, they were the only option available in the area. He realized he had become deeply loyal to Jeong-un without ever making a conscious decision to do so. This did not bother him. His past had shaped him for this role. Gchan had been abandoned by his parents and raised as an assassin. However, he lacked talent in that craft and was forced into early retirement, much like Guard Gam. Even though Guard Gam had a reputation, he had not been a decent person. He used Gchan like a disposable tool. Now Gchan felt the same dynamic repeating with Jeong-un, although he had no real complaints. He assumed once he outlived his usefulness, he would be cast aside again. Yet for now, his life felt more stable than that of the other outer hall guards. While waiting at the Eternal Orchid, the organization's master eventually arrived and apologized for the delay. Gchan simply asked that the task be taken. The master introduced a woman standing beside him and asked for Gchan's opinion about her appearance. This irritated Gchan, who immediately demanded that she leave. The master watched the woman with distracted eyes, not fully listening to Gchan. Unexpectedly, she slapped him across the face and declared that she was done pretending. Removing her wig, she exposed her identity. The master attempted to retaliate, yet she easily evaded and twisted his head a full 180 degrees, ending his life in an instant. Gchan quickly went on alert and drew his sword. The woman kicked a table toward him, attempting to limit his movements. During the exchange, she greeted him casually and referred to him as low-ranking assassin number 86. He froze momentarily, confused. She appeared disappointed that he did not recognize her. After a short pause, Gchan remembered. Her name was Karen, granddaughter of the leader of the Flying Assassins. To become the leader of the Flying Assassins, one must undergo the ritual of 100 murders, taking the lives of 100 humans. Those who succeed become candidates for sect leadership and are recognized as one of the 4 great assassins of Gyeongwoon. They also receive a unique weapon known as the Keen Benevolence Needle. Seeing this weapon in Karen's hand, Gchan suspected that she might be the current sect leader. Although she possessed the talent, her unpredictable personality had always been considered a disqualifier. Many believed she would never succeed in the ritual due to her erratic nature. Gchan recalled how arrogant she used to be. Now, seeing her hold such authority left him speechless. She addressed him with a sense of superiority and demanded that he call her sect leader from now on. Gchan, overwhelmed by the sudden power shift, dropped to his knees and greeted her respectfully. Karen muttered that she had waited for this recognition. She then explained her purpose: she needed his help infiltrating the Mok family. Gchan asked for a reason, and she revealed that intermediate assassin number 29 had failed in a mission. The target had been Guard Gam. This revelation startled Gchan. Karen admitted that Guard Gam had been a capable assassin, and she had not expected his failure. Given his disappearance, she assumed he was dead. According to the golden rule of the Flying Assassins, a failed mission must be completed by someone of higher rank. Karen declared her intention to eliminate the 3rd son of the Mok family. At Jeong's residence, Blue grew impatient as she watched him continue his relentless martial arts training. Jeong glanced at the sky and noted that it was time for dinner. This announcement pleased Blue. At the table, a maid devoured her meal voraciously while Jeong read a book in silence. The maid then sighed in contentment, declaring that eating was life's greatest joy. This maid, in truth, was Blue, who had possessed her days ago and seemed to enjoy it thoroughly. Jeong considered that he should have allowed this from the beginning, although he knew that a maid's body was too fragile to withstand possession by a high-level spirit. Blue had once attempted to possess a more attractive maid and nearly killed her in the process. A normal body simply could not handle her power. Blue asked if Jeong had developed an interest in shamanism, observing how often he read books on the subject. He explained that the current book was about the 6-person spirit summoning technique, one of the more intriguing texts Blue had brought him. At that moment, Jeong sensed a powerful energy from afar. Blue was impressed by how much his perception had improved. Meanwhile, Gchan delivered a maid's uniform to Karen, who was unimpressed by the garment. She stated that even a courtesan's clothing would be more respectable. Gchan sensed how dire the situation had become. If Karen was truly the sect leader, she had likely reached at least the transcendent level. Once she discovered that Gchan had betrayed Guard Gam, she would surely kill him. To prevent this outcome, he decided to report everything to Jeong as soon as possible. As Karen prepared to change, Gchan offered to wait outside. She teased him, suggesting he could stay and watch since such chances were rare. He paused and blushed slightly before she admitted she was joking. She then thanked him, saying infiltration would have been impossible without his help. Gchan replied that he also wanted to avenge his senior brother, though in truth, he said this only to save his life. He knew that Karen would kill him the moment she discovered the truth. Gchan tried to sound convincing, remarking that having Karen at his side felt like commanding an entire army. She responded by saying she trusted him. As he turned to leave, Karen suddenly threw acupuncture needles at him, locking his body in place. She accused Gchan of being disloyal to Guard Gam. If he had truly wanted revenge, he would have taken action by now. Watching him pretend to be an avenger disgusted her. She called him a pathetic man who had been forced into retirement and mocked his pretense. It was clear she knew everything. She told him that age had not made him wiser and claimed he remained just as foolish. She advised that someone like him should simply die. Gchan reflected on everything that had gone wrong. Perhaps it began when Jeong killed the real 3rd son, or perhaps it was his own betrayal of Guard Gam. Ultimately, he concluded that his weakness had brought all of this upon him. Karen drew her knife and declared her farewell. In that critical moment, Jeong smashed through the wall and executed the thought-shattering 8 techniques ritual of attachment, snatching the blade from Karen's hand. He charged into the room to protect Gchan. For the first time, Gchan saw Jeong not as a trickster or manipulator, but as a true hero. Karen seized Gchan and used him as a hostage, aiming to threaten Jeong. Gchan remained calm, convinced that Karen must have reviewed Jeong's background. That information would have described him as someone with no martial prowess. Now, however, she had witnessed Jeong demonstrating techniques like telekinesis, which would make her assume he had reached the transcendent level. What Karen did not realize was that Jeong was no ordinary martial artist. He was something far worse, a being with no regard for human life. Despite this, he raised his weapon not with cruelty, but with purpose. Gchan closed his eyes, certain he was about to die. Instead, Jeong threw the weapon aside and calmly requested that Karen release him. He offered her freedom in return and explained that losing Gchan would be a cost he could not afford. Gchan was deeply moved by Jeong's words. Karen, however, mocked the gesture. She claimed she would spare Jeong if he dropped to his knees and begged. To her surprise, he actually appeared to comply. The sight left her stunned. Jeong was willing to humiliate himself to save a mere guard. Yet before falling, Jeong shifted his gaze toward a fixed point and suddenly snatched his weapon from the ground. He sprinted forward, charging not directly at Karen but aiming elsewhere. That misdirection was intentional. From behind, Blue unleashed a spiritual attack aimed at Karen. Although she could not see Blue, she sensed the energy and reacted swiftly, dodging the strike. At that moment, she forgot to keep her attention on Jeong. He took the opportunity to launch a blade toward her. However, Karen avoided the attack with ease. Jeong then moved to retrieve the acupuncture needles from Gchan. Karen remained confused. She sensed an unusual energy in the room but could not pinpoint its source. One thing had become clear to her: Jeong was not as powerful as she initially believed. The failed attack with the blade confirmed that he had not yet reached the transcendent level. Recognizing her advantage, she charged at Jeong. In her hand, she held a master-level weapon reserved only for the leader of the flying assassins. Jeong reacted by invoking the ritual of attachment, attempting to pull the weapon from her grip. However, the needle resisted his technique. Designed to kill even elite martial artists, it had been forged to ignore inner energy manipulation. As the needle flew toward him, Jeong's movement faltered. His control over the weapon collapsed the moment it neared him. The needle's construction made it impervious to his energy-based techniques. It continued its path, aimed directly at him. In that split second, Gchan leapt into action. Rising to his feet, he hurled himself in front of Jeong, placing his body between the deadly needle and its intended target. His action caught everyone off guard. The room fell silent. His sacrifice stunned both allies and enemies alike. Fury consumed Jeong as he stared at Gchan's body. After losing his grandfather, most of his joyful moments had been spent beside Gchan. That bond made the sight unbearable. Without hesitation, he ordered Blue to end Karen's life at once. Karen attempted to resist, launching her ordinary needles toward Jeong. However, he countered effortlessly using the ritual of attachment. The same needle she had intended to kill with was now under his control. It turned against her. Blue commented coldly that Karen should have perished while mercy was still an option. Without delay, she pulled Karen into her blood realm. Within that strange space, Jeong informed her that provoking him had been her final mistake. Blue then ended her life without leaving a single wound or drop of blood behind. Outside the realm, Gchan's condition deteriorated. Blood spilled from his mouth as he lay fading. Jeong knelt beside him, his expression heavy with grief. He whispered that he had hoped they would share more time together. Then he asked why Gchan had done such a thing. Gchan smiled weakly and replied that he had only fulfilled his duty as a guard. Jeong had tried to protect him, so he could not allow himself to betray him. Throughout his life, Jeong had been the only one who never abandoned him. With that final truth, Gchan passed away peacefully, expressing his happiness at having met Jeong. Jeong remained frozen, devastated by the loss. Blue then possessed Karen's vacant body, remarking on how youthful and beautiful it appeared. Still, even this vessel struggled to contain her power. The instability irritated her, though she quietly admitted her own sorrow over Gchan's death. There might have been a chance to bring him back as a vengeful spirit, but he held no regrets. His spirit, therefore, did not linger. Jeong, however, refused to let that be the end. Recalling what he had learned from the six-person spirit summoning technique, he explained that while hatred could give birth to a vengeful spirit, such spirits might also form from death in a place saturated with regret and death-kai. His own body contained an abundance of such energy, so he decided to use it to bring Gchan back. He began the ritual, forming various complex hand signs. Blue observed the process and realized that a servant spirit had indeed taken shape through Jeong's death-kai. The spirit's energy, however, was fragile and unstable. Without a proper vessel, Gchan would soon vanish. Jeong then proposed they find a suitable body. Blue quickly understood his intent. He was suggesting they place Gchan into an available physical form. Gchan, hovering on the brink of fading, could still hear Jeong's voice calling to him. Though he felt weak and powerless, that voice brought him back. As his eyes fluttered open, he saw Jeong standing before him. In confusion, Gchan asked how he was still alive. Jeong explained that his death chi had revived him, binding him as a servant spirit. Due to the weak energy, they had been forced to act quickly, placing his spirit into the only body they had available. That body belonged to Karen. Gchan stared at himself in disbelief. His features, movements, and very presence now mirrored the woman who had tried to kill Jeong only moments ago. Embarrassment washed over him as he came to terms with his new form. Yet despite the shock, one truth remained. Jeong had saved him. Gchan pleaded with Jeong to release him from Karen's body, unable to cope with being trapped in a woman's form. However, Jeong reminded him that without a new body, Gchan's spirit would vanish before one could be found. Moreover, Karen's death meant her body served as the only available vessel. Scratching his head, Gchan reluctantly acknowledged the truth in Jeong's words. The situation grew more complicated as the flying assassins would soon learn of Karen's demise. Blue, irritated, expressed frustration that Gchan had taken over the body she preferred. This marked Gchan's first direct encounter with Blue, and he could now sense her energy clearly. Becoming a spirit allowed him to perceive power levels in a way he had never experienced before. He realized then how extraordinary Jeong was, having remained by Blue's side all this time. Blue reminded him that he should feel fortunate. In a single day, Gchan had advanced from a second-rate martial artist to the ascendant level. Jeong suddenly attempted a casual kick, which Gchan dodged effortlessly, proving that his body now possessed reflexes far beyond his former capabilities. Despite that, Gchan remained focused on the discomfort of being in a female form. He repeated that he was still a man. Blue teased him, making suggestive remarks about the liberties he could take with the body. Gchan protested firmly, stating he would never behave that way. Jeong assured him that once another body became available, the transfer would happen. Before Gchan could respond, a guard arrived with news. Lord Mok had regained consciousness. Meanwhile, Go, a shaman from the Ghost Shadows, reached the Mok family manor. Accompanied by his spirit Gojo, he observed Jeong's residence from a distance. He quickly sensed that the area was under a powerful domain, strong enough to catch him if he stepped too close. As he assessed the surroundings, he noticed someone stumbling near a doorway. It was Young Ho, the first young master, clearly intoxicated. A guard informed Young Ho that all young masters were being summoned now that Lord Mok had awakened. Go recognized the opportunity. If Jeong went to visit Lord Mok, it would be the perfect moment to separate him from Blue and strike while he was unguarded. Back at the manor, Jeong had drifted into thought, causing the guard to snap him back to the present. Jeong replied that he had merely been reflecting on the good news of Lord Mok's recovery. However, he confessed to himself that this also presented a complication. He had only planned to remain in the Mok family long enough to study martial arts before quietly departing. Now, he had no choice but to participate in the competition to become the heir. The guard informed him that Lord Mok had called for all the young masters. Jeong prepared to leave and instructed Gchan to clean up the mess. Gchan complied, closing the door behind him once Jeong left. The task was unpleasant, especially since it involved handling his own corpse. He muttered to himself about the absurdity of ending up in someone else's body, particularly one with what he referred to as two major complications. Looking around carefully, he began undressing, rationalizing that he needed a change of clothes. Blue, smirking in amusement, watched from the shadows before leaving the room. Gchan, embarrassed beyond words, wished he could disappear. Later, Yuqian arrived, his face contorted with anger. Blue noted that despite surviving his ordeal, his skin looked odd. Still, at least he had not fallen into chi deviation. Jeong greeted him calmly, prompting Yuqian to cut straight to the point, asking if Jeong had truly attempted to master the manual. Feigning innocence, Jeong replied with a question of his own. Yuqian, clearly irritated, believed Jeong's understanding surpassed his own and found that difficult to accept. In that moment, Blue sensed an intruder had entered despite the domain she had cast over the manor. Jeong realized immediately that someone from the ghost shadows had broken through the barrier. Blue departed swiftly to track the source. Inside Lord Mok's hall, Jeong entered alongside Yuqian. From a distance, Yeonpyeong observed the two and wondered how they had suddenly become so close. Meanwhile, the First Lady scolded her son Young-ho for reeking of alcohol, while Yeonpyeong judged him as pathetic. Speculation grew that Lord Mok had summoned them to announce his decision regarding the heir. Yuqian privately thought that once he secured the heir's title, the truth behind the secret manual would no longer matter. Jeong, on the other hand, focused on Lord Mok himself. Known as one of the 10 strongest masters in the province, his presence alone radiated overwhelming strength. As all the young masters filed into the hall, they bowed respectfully, offering their greetings and wishing Lord Mok a swift recovery. Lord Mok expressed his appreciation to everyone who had gathered. Each young master kept his head lowered in respect, except Jeong. He remained calm and observant. Unlike the others, Jeong understood that concern for Lord Mok's condition was not driven by ambition, but by fear. Despite the aura of murderous energy that had surrounded Lord Mok for so long, his presence did not appear weakened in the slightest. The true question remained: who had caused such intense energy to take root within Lord Mok? Far from the main residence, within the outer hall designated for martial artists, a towering man with a physique resembling that of a giant stood among a room littered with corpses. He had been freed from the murderous influence. Beside him, a shaman confirmed that he had heard Gojo's cry earlier. From that, both concluded that Lord Mok had been rescued by another shaman. The two began making their way out of the blood-soaked residence. Nearby, a guard who had survived played dead, hoping to escape their notice. However, the towering man spotted him. Without hesitation, he asked if the guard had enjoyed his rest, then swiftly struck him down. Kicking the lifeless head aside, he gave a command to his lethal unit. They were to advance toward the Mok family estate. Within the manor, Lord Mok addressed the young masters, asking why they thought he had summoned them. None answered. Jeong alone stepped forward and calmly stated that the meeting was to determine who would become the successor. Lord Mok, surprised by Jeong's confidence, noted the change in him. In the past, Jeong would never have dared to speak so openly. The master of the inner manor reminded everyone that Jeong had been the one who saved Lord Mok. Initially, Lord Mok had doubted the story. Now, standing before the transformed young man, he believed it. Once, Jeong had not even been able to lift his gaze in Lord Mok's presence. Now, he stood tall and without fear. To judge their worthiness, Lord Mok declared that each of the young masters would undergo a test. Jeong raised his hand and asked to withdraw from the trial. His words stunned everyone. Yeonpyeong felt relieved, believing that one more obstacle had removed itself from his path. Lord Mok demanded an explanation. Jeong responded with calm honesty. He claimed he lacked the talent, achievement, and qualities necessary to inherit the position. Compared to his elder and younger brothers, he felt unworthy. There was no arrogance in his tone, only sincerity. Lord Mok laughed, deep and loud. To him, this version of Jeong was unrecognizable. The arrogance once seen in his youth had vanished. There was no trace of greed in his voice, only clarity. In Lord Mok's eyes, this alone was enough to make him suitable for the role. Removing his upper garment, Lord Mok reminded everyone that Jeong had saved him during his possession. For that reason alone, he was qualified to be the next leader. Gasps echoed through the room when they saw what lay beneath his robe. One of Lord Mok's arms was missing. Yeonpyeong stood speechless. He had heard rumors of Jeong's actions, but he had never imagined the scale of what had occurred. Jeong himself was taken aback. His eyes fell on Lord Mok's chest, which bore a distinct sword mark. It was the same mark that had been carved into his grandfather's body, the one that Jeong had asked Gchan to investigate through the intelligence network. More importantly, Jeong remembered seeing that exact mark on his own chest during a past battle with the man wearing the hat. That scar had once puzzled him. Now, a new connection has been made. The same symbol had reappeared again and again, linking his grandfather's death, his own near death, and Lord Mok's injury. For the first time, Jeong held a solid lead. That single mark, engraved into each of their bodies under different circumstances, was no coincidence. It was a clue, and perhaps the first step toward uncovering the deeper truths behind his family's suffering and his grandfather's mysterious end. While Lord Mok addressed the gathered crowd, Jeong suddenly felt a strange sensation from outside and instinctively turned his head to the right. Lord Mok noticed the shift in Jeong's focus and could not understand why he was looking away during such an important moment. Moments later, Lord Mok sensed it too, an ominous presence that unsettled the atmosphere. Before anyone could react further, a guard burst through the door with urgent news. A massacre was unfolding at the outer gates. The guards were doing their best to hold the ambush back, but the enemy forces were overwhelming in number. Outside, a massive figure advanced with deliberate steps, gripping a large blade. With a single swing, he shattered the manor's main gate, the shockwave hurling several guards through the air. He gave the command for his forces to search and retrieve their objective. At a distance, Go watched the chaos while concealing his presence. He understood that under these circumstances, eliminating Jeong would be impossible. His focus shifted when a shaman accompanying the large man summoned a terrifying entity from behind the front lines. The overwhelming power of the beast struck fear into Go. The shaman began chanting, and in moments, Go's invisibility was broken. The shaman seized him by the throat and demanded to know whether he had been the one who dispelled the murderous energy surrounding Lord Mok. Go immediately recognized the shaman's strength and deduced he must be among the top-tier shamans. He tried to explain, muttering that there had been a misunderstanding. However, the shaman showed no interest in excuses. He tightened his grip and accused Go of interfering with the workings of the Field Killers, a dangerous faction operating under a powerful organization. Go died shortly after, his body discarded without ceremony. When the large man inquired about the delay, the shaman coldly replied that he had simply exterminated a nuisance. With no time to spare, they resumed their mission to confront Lord Mok and recover the treasure that belonged to their organization. High above the chaos, Lord Mok stood on the rooftop and assessed the threat. He announced that the invaders were prepared to die the moment they entered the grounds of the Mok family. He commanded the young masters to follow him. However, Jeong took a different path. As he moved away from the others, his thoughts returned to the clue he had just found concerning his grandfather's death. Yet fate had interrupted again with this attack. Jeong noticed the air thickening with death chi. An enemy lunged at him from behind, but he caught the attacker's sword midair and killed him instantly. The battlefield was soaked in anguish, fear, and suffering, making it a source of immense death chi. While it presented an opportunity to absorb this energy, it also posed great risk. Circulating such corrupted chi could backfire. At that moment, Gchan arrived to check on him. Jeong noted his timing was perfect and asked him to keep watch so he could begin circulating his chi without distractions. Gchan was startled by the request but nodded in agreement. Jeong slowly initiated his technique, recognizing that the density of death chi here was 3 times greater than what he had absorbed during the Chai Morio incident. Gchan fended off approaching enemies, fully aware that he needed reinforcements. Just then, Sir Sang appeared on the battlefield. Gchan remembered Jeong's words, that Sir Sang had once been possessed by the demon mage. Despite the chaos, the demon mage stood eerily still. A line then appeared across his body, running from shoulder to waist. In the next breath, his torso split in two. The towering warrior had sliced him cleanly in half. The massive attacker now fixed his eyes on Jeong. He found it intriguing that someone dared to circulate chi amidst the chaos. Gchan stood frozen in place. Though he had reached the transcendent level as a martial artist, every fiber of his being warned him of the danger. The presence of the enemy stirred a primal fear that even ascension could not suppress. Gchan called out to Jeong, urging him to wake up, yet Jeong remained immersed in his chi circulation. Gchan quickly realized that disturbing him now would cause a severe backlash, potentially leading to chi deviation. He also understood that he was in no position to stop the towering enemy advancing toward them. The massive man moved past Gchan with ease. His focus shifted toward Jeong's unusual chi flow, which piqued his interest. He raised his large blade to test whether this strange circulation was real or not. Gchan, unable to hold back, launched himself toward the enemy in an attempt to intervene. He rifled through Karen's memories for any combat techniques that might be useful in this moment. One came to mind: the Flying Death Art's third form. The enemy acknowledged Gchan's speed but remained unfazed. As Gchan maneuvered midair, the large man flicked a finger toward him. The force of that simple gesture sent Gchan crashing to the ground, immobilized. With Jeong now vulnerable, the towering intruder moved in to deliver a decisive blow. At that moment, Lord Mok appeared and intercepted the attack. Although he successfully blocked the strike, the sheer power behind it caused him to cough up blood. The enemy gave Lord Mok a single warning. If he wished to prevent the complete destruction of the Mok family manor, then he must surrender the treasure he had taken from their association. Meanwhile, Blue examined her domain. She realized that the Ime Mangryang spirit that had entered earlier was now dead. This could only mean one thing: its master had also perished. Blue concluded that Jeong could not have killed such a powerful shaman so quickly, which meant something far more dangerous was present within the Yeongmuk family grounds. Jeong eventually opened his eyes to find his surroundings in disarray. The battle had ended, and everyone was now kneeling before the intruders. The presence of death chi had diminished, disappointing him slightly, as he had hoped to absorb more of it. He moved toward Gchan, puzzled by the change in atmosphere, and asked what had transpired. Gchan, still recovering, noted that the demon mage no longer possessed Sir Sang's body. He explained that after clashing once, Lord Mok had acknowledged the overwhelming power of the giant intruder. Faced with no other option, Lord Mok had chosen to surrender. He offered the location of the stolen treasure, in exchange for the safety of everyone in the manor. The large man accepted, though reluctantly. He admitted that it would have been better to delay asking for the treasure's location, as now he was bound by his word to spare the Yeongmuk family. He introduced himself as the Lifeblade King, Sonyeon, one of the 5 kings of the Cheonji Association. The mere mention of that name horrified Gchan. Jeong, unfamiliar with the title, inquired further. Gchan elaborated that the Cheonji Association was a dominant force responsible for splitting the central plains of the Murim world into 3 regions. Their philosophy revered strength above all, and in their pursuit of conquest, they had once bathed the continent in blood. Hearing their name alone was enough to instill fear. The Mok family may have held prestige and power, but against the Cheonji Association, they stood no chance. Sonyeon was not just any warrior. He held the title of the King of Brilliance, a symbol of unmatched strength within the association. Had Lord Mok chosen resistance, the entire manor could have been reduced to ashes. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Lord Mok had surrendered and revealed the location of the item. Their true objective was not a simple artifact or weapon, but a forbidden relic hidden beneath the medicinal hall. It was a book bound in human skin, a treasure linked to ancient and sinister practices. Gchan advised Jeong to maintain a low profile until the Cheonji Association departed from the Mok family. Unexpectedly, Jeong was already on his way to meet Lord Mok. Concerns about his well-being surfaced from Lord Mok as Jeong continued circulating his chi during this tense crisis. Unfazed, Jeong focused on a more pressing matter and asked Lord Mok about the sword-shaped mark on his side, seeking its origin immediately. Lord Mok seemed confused by the question. At that moment, a guard presented the Lifeblade King, Sonyeon, with a wooden box. Sonyeon beamed with delight at the sight. Lord Mok attempted to suggest to Jeong that they discuss the mark later, citing the gravity of the situation. Jeong pressed him again for answers right then. Meanwhile, Sonyeon opened the box with excitement, only to become enraged, his aura surging overwhelmingly and causing the entire courtyard to tremble. Such power left everyone nearby frozen in fear. Inside the box lay a pair of earrings, an unmistakable gift from Lord Mok to the First Lady upon their wedding. Both Lord Mok and the First Lady recognized them immediately. Shock overtook the First Lady as she realized Jeong must have planted them in the box. Jeong smirked and loudly proclaimed that the earrings belonged to her. Lord Mok, unable to comprehend Jeong's intentions, shifted his gaze between them. The First Lady's terror filled the air. Moved by her expression, Jeong could only think how satisfying this revelation would feel in a story. Sonyeon, furious, immediately crushed the earrings and issued a grim threat. He would slaughter the entire Mok family manor. The First Lady attempted to calm Sonyeon, insisting she would never leave such a clue if she truly stole the treasure from under the medicinal hall. Her explanation failed to satisfy Sonyeon. Suddenly, he swung his blade at her throat. Inner Manor Master Makendon acted swiftly, blocking the attack, but his sword buckled under the force. He fell heavily to the ground. The enraged Lifeblade King prepared to finish off the First Lady and obliterate the Mok family. Jeong stepped forward and demanded that Lord Mok finally explain the mark's origin. Sonyan slammed his sword into a nearby guard, crushing him as though he were an insect. Witnesses screamed and retreated. Despite Lord Mok's plea to wait until after the incident, Sonyan's rage only grew. He beheaded another guard in brutal fashion. In desperation, Lord Mok yelled for Jeong to step back and questioned if he intended to doom everyone present. At that moment, Ang Ho, guard to the First Lady, rose and shouted for attention. She suggested the true culprits were whoever stood to gain from framing the First Lady. According to her, the earrings had likely been placed days earlier to mislead suspicion. By that logic, the only people who had access to the secret manuals were Jeong and Gchan. Ang Ho, under the influence of Demon Mage, clearly aimed to implicate them. The second young master and Yuqian both protested, claiming innocence. Regardless, Sonyan glared at them and threatened to peel their skin alive until they revealed the truth. At this point, Lord Mok interrupted and revealed that the killer's mark was left by none other than Demon Blade. Recognized as one of the legendary 6 skies and 8 stars, Demon Blade was the name Jeong had long sought. That revelation confirmed the identity of his grandfather's murderer. Suddenly, a chorus of bells rang through the manor. High above in the upper chambers, Demon Mage writhed in pain. Shaman Zhou rushed down, declaring the presence of an evil spirit in the manor. Jeong's instincts flared and he recognized Zhou as dangerous. Zhou chanted a powerful incantation, forcing Demon Mage to emerge from the escort's body. Even Gchan felt a shift in the air, unsettled by the weight of Zhou's spell. Just as Demon Mage began fading into the void, a dagger shot through the air toward Zhou. A guard intercepted it with swift precision. The dagger had come from Jeong. Zhou approached and confirmed that Jeong could perceive the spirit as well. Jeong, however, feigned ignorance, refusing to acknowledge what had just happened. His motive was clear: he had acted to protect Demon Mage, seeing potential rather than danger. He had already sensed Zhou's strength, which neared that of Sonyan. Jeong's response prompted Zhou to consider eliminating Demon Mage completely. The surrounding people remained unaware of the spectacle, unable to see what unfolded. For martial artists, talent allows advancement through physical realms. For shamans, spiritual gifts are far rarer. Within that small number, even fewer can naturally perceive demonic entities. Training might improve ritual precision, but the ability to see spirits cannot be taught. In Zhou's eyes, Jeong was born with the makings of a great shaman. Zhou himself lacked such innate vision. Despite this, Jeong still claimed ignorance. Determined to expose him, Zhou began casting a binding spell to trap Demon Mage in an isolated dimension. Typically, spirits do not obey human command, yet Demon Mage began to move in line with Jeong's will. This unnatural compliance shocked even Zhou. Jeong mirrored Zhou's movements, replicating the exact hand signs of the 4-point binding chain spell. A new energy layer formed within the binding field, then another. The result tore the spell apart and freed Demon Mage. Zhou stood stunned. He asked if Jeong had studied shamanism. Jeong responded without realization, questioning whether one needed to formally learn it to perform it. The answer astonished Zhou. Jeong had replicated a high-level ritual on site, something few shamans could master after years of training. Zhou acknowledged that Jeong's abilities extended beyond perception. The talent, speed of execution, and instinct made him exceptional. Zhou laughed and withdrew the spell. He turned to Sonyan and requested Jeong for himself. Those nearby were shocked. Sonyan agreed to the request and declared he would dispose of the rest. Lord Mok looked at Jeong with unease, remembering the promise made, to protect the Mok family if he was told the truth about the mark. As Sonyan lifted his blade to strike down the remaining guards, Jeong stepped forward. He claimed that the treasure sought by the Cheon Association was in his possession. Sonyan warned of severe consequences should this be false. Jeong calmly cut him off, pointed to his head, and explained that the book was no longer material, it existed only in his memory. He added that he had burned the physical copy. Sonyan laughed bitterly at the idea. According to him, the book could not be destroyed. It was sealed by a mysterious force, one that preserved it through supernatural means. Drawing his blade again, he swung toward Jeong's neck. In the split second before impact, Jeong revealed a critical detail: the book's cover, crafted from human skin, had resisted the fire. The blood-ridden text inside, however, had burned completely. Sonyan halted his blade mid-swing, surprised by the knowledge. Very few in the Cheon Association were aware that the book's inner contents were written in blood. This detail could not have been guessed. If Jeong was telling the truth, it was likely that someone of significant power had ordered Sonyeon to retrieve it. Sonyeon lowered his weapon but demanded Jeong prove his claim by reciting the contents. Jeong, confident in his memory, prepared to speak. As he began, blood seeped beneath his feet, thick, red, and alive. It was the unmistakable presence of Blue. Jeong turned and saw Blue watching him. Without speaking, Blue conveyed the message clearly. If he uttered a single verse, he would die. Jeong realized that this was not merely a warning. Blue's wrath had taken form. The blood that spread across the courtyard was an illusion powerful enough to cover the entire Mok family estate. Jeong could not understand the full reason behind it, but he sensed Blue's deep resentment toward the Cheonji Association. From the way Blue had warned him not to utter the book's contents, it became clear that she despised the idea of the association learning its secrets. However, silence would only bring death upon both Jeong and Blue. Until he fulfilled his vow of avenging his grandfather, retreat was not an option. Blue, recognizing Jeong's struggle, offered a solution. She told him to replicate the movements she would now demonstrate. Although uncertainty gnawed at him, knowing that if the stance differed from the book's true form, his deception would be exposed, he chose to place his trust in her. He accepted her offer. Sonyeon, still waiting, questioned why Jeong had yet to speak. In response, Jeong took a sword from a nearby guard and positioned himself firmly in front of Sonyeon. At that moment, Blue removed a hairpin and began to move. Jeong followed, copying her exact motions. As she demonstrated, he began to recite verses and transition through the sword forms in perfect sequence. Sonyeon watched in silence, gradually overwhelmed by what he saw. The elegance of the movements, the precision of each step, everything mirrored the lost technique of the moon pulse. There was no flaw in Jeong's display. To Sonyeon, it was undeniable. The sword form thought to be lost for a century had resurfaced before his eyes, performed not by a master, but by someone with minimal cultivation. It was both astonishing and troubling. Despite the confirmation, Jeong continued to recite further verses and perform more of the sequence. This prompted Sonyeon to quickly intervene and stop him. Revealing too much would risk spreading the knowledge. Jeong then demanded acknowledgement. Sonyeon, now serious, admitted the technique was genuine. However, a new problem emerged. Jeong had now learned the moon pulse, a skill meant to remain sealed unless permission was granted. The association could not let this stand. Sonyeon realized the only option was to extract the information from Jeong's mind and eliminate him afterward. Jo stepped forward to remind Sonyeon of the promise, to hand Jeong over to him. As Sonyeon reflected, he acknowledged that Jeong had accomplished something no one within the association had managed. The fact that someone with such a low martial arts level could grasp the moon pulse technique made Jeong a rare and desirable talent. Yet this talent also made him dangerous. While Sonyeon contemplated how to proceed, Jeong suddenly raised his sword toward his own neck. In an instant, Sonyeon moved to stop him, grabbing the blade and forcing Jeong back. The entire hall fell silent, shocked by what had just occurred. Jeong explained that the reactions of those present proved how valuable the knowledge in his head truly was. He declared that he had no intention of sharing anything willingly. The only choice left was to take him away. Sonyeon stood bewildered. Had he not intervened in time, Jeong would have severed his own head. Jeong reiterated that he understood the importance of what he carried and would not surrender it without reason. He invited them to do as they wished. This statement stunned everyone nearby. Sonyeon asked whether Jeong truly intended to go with the Cheonji Association. Jeong believed that no threat or torture would force the information from him. His recent action had made that clear. Instead, he intended to use the association to escape the Mok family estate. Later, a carriage made its way through the mountain path, heavily guarded on all sides. Inside the carriage, Jeong sat silently, taken captive by the Cheonji Association. However, he was not alone. Another figure sat quietly across from him, Yucheon, who had also been taken into custody. The carriage came to a stop for a short break. Inside, Yucheon sat bound and frustrated, still grappling with the fact that he had been taken as a hostage. Hours earlier, Sonyeon, the King of Brilliance, had rendered Jeong unconscious and issued 2 commands. First, the Mok family was to isolate itself for the next 10 years. Second, a hostage was to be taken back to the Cheonji Association, specifically, the successor. In the eyes of the association, strength determined succession. Among the siblings, Yuqian was undeniably the strongest, so everyone had pointed to him. Although Yuqian had always longed for recognition as Lord Mok's successor, this was not how he had envisioned it. Now bound tightly, with his energy sealed, he could only sit and stew in silent resentment. At least he had not been knocked out like Jeong. Perhaps Sonyeon believed that someone like Jeong, given the chance, would cause chaos if conscious. Earlier that morning, Yuqian had held hopes of rising within the family. Now he was nothing more than a bargaining piece. Suddenly, he sensed a presence. The only ones inside the carriage were himself and the unconscious Jeong. Then the bindings around his limbs began to loosen. It was Jeong who had removed them. Yuqian asked how Jeong had managed to break free. Jeong simply said he had his ways. He then offered to untie Yuqian completely if he answered one question. He wanted to know about Demon Blade, one of the 6 skies and 8 stars. Yuqian appeared confused but responded. He explained that there was a rumor, one most people believed, though he could not confirm the details. Jeong found it strange that Demon Blade would be in such an unexpected location, though that place remained unrevealed to those watching the events unfold. At that moment, Blue's voice reached Jeong. She informed him that the situation outside had been handled. Keeping his word, Jeong untied the rest of Yuqian's restraints. However, Yuqian objected. He warned Jeong that escaping now could bring retaliation against the Yeonmuk family. Jeong showed no concern for that possibility. He struck Yuqian in the neck, rendering him unconscious. Without his inner energy, Yuqian was powerless. Outside, Blue told Jeong that she had cleared the path. They had to move quickly before Joe arrived. As Jeong stepped out of the carriage, he immediately sensed something strange. Blue asked what was wrong, but Jeong struggled to explain. She told him to hurry if nothing was stopping him. She then asked whether he would be alright after using the lightness skill, which was designed to increase movement speed through foot techniques. Jeong began circulating his inner energy and activated the technique. His body felt lighter, and his pace quickened. With this method, he moved faster than he could by running, making good progress through the forest. Eventually, he noticed something unusual. He glanced at a tree and abruptly came to a halt. Blue asked what had happened. Jeong replied that they had been running in circles. He pointed to a tree he had now passed 4 times. This pattern confirmed his suspicion. Blue considered whether an array might be causing it, though she admitted she should have noticed if that were the case. She suggested that Jeong was simply nervous. He then informed her that he had sprained his ankle from improper use of the lightness skill. She approached, offering to help with the pain. As she focused on healing him, Jeong suddenly grabbed her by the neck and demanded to know who she was. She told him to release her. However, he claimed that if she were truly Blue, she would have broken free already. He accused the impostor of choosing the wrong person to impersonate and said the act had been poorly executed. Moments later, her form changed into that of a willow tree doll. Jeong joined his hands and began chanting. The energy surrounding him converged, and the illusion dissolved. The one behind the trick was Joe. Joe observed the outcome with interest. The technique he had used was advanced, intended to cause the victim to perceive a trusted figure in the form of a tree doll. That Jeong had shattered the illusion in mere minutes was astonishing. Impressed, Joe expressed his wish for Jeong to become his disciple. Jeong stood about 10 steps from Joe and noticed that no one else was around. As long as he could act before Joe began a spell, he believed he had a chance to win. With that hope, he moved to strike. However, Joe had already activated a spell on him. Joe revealed that he had anticipated such an attempt. Aware that Jeong might act when isolated, he had set up a barrier nearby. If Jeong attempted to force his way out, his body would be shredded. This, Joe said, was the first lesson he was imparting as his master. Jeong immediately rejected the idea. He had never agreed to become Joe's disciple. Joe then tossed a doll toward him. Jeong caught it and realized it carried no trace of the demon mage's energy. Joe explained that surviving in the Cheonji Association required obedience to those in power. He then offered Jeong a chance to become his disciple, promising it would give him the protection he needed. Jeong accepted the offer but imposed one condition. He demanded to know how Joe had sealed the demon mage within the doll so completely. Joe responded with laughter. He claimed it was not difficult to teach but insisted that Jeong first swear an oath. Joe threw a string of beads toward him and instructed him to wear them. He was to swear, using the words, I, Jeong, son of Lord Mok, will become the disciple of Joe. Jeong paused and asked what the consequences of the oath would be. Zhou revealed that once sworn, Jeong would be incapable of harming him. This measure had been taken since Jeong had already attempted to attack and escape. After a brief hesitation, Jeong placed the bracelet on his wrist and recited the oath exactly as instructed. The bracelet, known as the beads of the cursed words, would ensure that the oath-taker could no longer refuse the commands of the one they had sworn loyalty to. Following the oath, Zhou handed him a book. It was a unique text on shamanism, written by Zhou himself. The technique involving the demon mage doll was included within it. Jeong asked to be released from the barrier spell, and Zhou replied that the method for undoing it was also detailed in the book. He gave Jeong 2 hours to succeed, warning that failure would lead to serious consequences. After Zhou departed, Blue descended from above, visibly relieved. Jeong immediately attempted to grab her by the neck, though she evaded him easily. When asked why he had done that, he claimed it was simply a test. Blue reminded him that watching him stumble through illusions had been amusing. With a puzzled expression, she asked why he had sworn an oath to Zhou. Jeong replied that he had done it to obtain the book. She still could not believe he had gone that far just for a book, finding it uncharacteristic. Without concern, Jeong removed the bracelet from his wrist. Blue looked at him, stunned. He explained that, based on the oath, he was neither Jeong nor the son of Lord Mok. This rendered the oath ineffective. Blue then asked if he intended to escape now that he was free. Jeong responded that he had changed his mind. He now considered becoming Zhou's disciple for real. Blue was taken aback by the statement. Jeong explained that he had overheard something about Demon Blade's whereabouts. Demon Blade, one of the 6 skies and 8 stars, was a martial artist whose skills had reached a near mythical level. The 6 skies represented the few individuals who had reached the pinnacle of martial mastery, while the 8 stars were just a step below. Demon Blade belonged to the latter group. His infamy had spread over the past 17 years. He had killed both righteous warriors and members of evil factions alike, leaving his allegiance uncertain. Some speculated he had ties to the imperial family, while others believed he belonged to the Cheon association. If Demon Blade was within the association, infiltrating it was Jeong's best chance to confront him. That was why he had accepted Zhou's offer. Blue remarked that this twist of fate explained why the two of them had met. Their paths were bound for the same destination. Suddenly, Blue made a request. She asked Jeong to become her disciple and to inherit her karma. She wished for him to carry her vengeance forward. Jeong recalled how, back at Yeonmuk Manor, Blue's wrath had been directed toward the Cheon association. He noted that a long time had passed. Perhaps time itself should have avenged her. Blue replied with a question of her own. If time had truly passed, then why did he still bear the mark? Jeong remained silent. Blue also could not forgive the descendants of her enemies, nor could she accept the way the truth had been buried. Her desire for vengeance remained fierce and unwavering. Her illusions, filled with blood and shadows, revealed how deeply her hatred ran. Jeong finally acknowledged her pain. He agreed to become her disciple. However, he also set a condition. He wanted to know the reason behind her quest for revenge. He refused to be drawn into a grudge he did not understand. She revealed only one detail. The Cheon Association had been founded by 3 major lineages. One of them was the Moon Vein. Jeong assumed that Blue must have belonged to that lineage. Still, he remained curious about what had driven her to hold her silence for so long. At last, Jeong introduced himself by his true name, Jeong. He declared his wish to become the vessel of her fate. From that moment onward, he became the disciple of Blue. Blue regarded Jeong's declaration with pride, her expression resolute. She accepted his will to become her disciple and expected to be addressed as master from that point forward. Jeong, however, presented a second condition. He intended to omit formal titles between them. This caught Blue off guard. She questioned his greeting from earlier. Jeong clarified that, since Blue was his spirit servant, she should also address him as master, just as the demon mage always had. Annoyed, Blue turned away and left. Jeong then focused on dispelling Zhou's spell and leaving the area. Meanwhile, Zhou waited on the other side, wondering why Jeong was taking so long. He assumed the spell might be too difficult for someone in the early stages of training. Moments later, a figure emerged from the surrounding mist. Jeong appeared without any of the guards noticing his departure from the carriage. Zhou was astonished. Jeong had successfully broken through the spell. In Zhou's mind, this achievement placed Jeong above every disciple he had ever trained. The thought of acquiring such a talent pleased him. He greeted Jeong warmly and invited him onto the carriage. Blue, now confined within a doll, expressed her discomfort. Any slight movement caused cracks to spread across her vessel. Jeong reassured her that a new vessel would be prepared soon and asked her to remain patient. In truth, Jeong had already comprehended the entire shamanic text Jo had given him. If Jo were to learn that the boy had absorbed its contents so quickly, he might collapse from shock. The carriage began its journey toward the Cheonji Association, marking the start of a new chapter. Half a month passed. Someone had begun trailing the convoy, Gchan, now bound to Jeong through a familiar's contract. After becoming Jeong's familiar through Karen's body, Gchan experienced a persistent anxiety when separated from him. If Jeong were to die, Gchan would share the same fate. To remain close, he needed to infiltrate the Cheonji Association. Karen's body, now elevated to the transcendent realm and trained in the assassin's path, gave Gchan access to her memories. The only feasible method of infiltration appeared to be seduction, though he found the idea distressing. More confusing was the path the convoy followed. Instead of heading directly to the association, they circled the outskirts, gathering adolescents along the way. Inside the carriage, Jeong continued reading when one of the escorts announced their arrival. He glanced out the window and saw the sprawling complex of the Cheonji Association. Its sheer scale impressed even him. Nearby, Sonyeon admired the majesty of the main gates, which had always captivated him. Blue cautioned Jeong to stay alert. Although he had progressed from third-rate to first-rate within half a month, his current strength still fell short of what was needed. Jeong noted that he could increase his power by using the death key again. However, Blue reminded him that once he reached the peak realm, true advancement would require enlightenment. Before she could finish, Jeong interrupted, pointing out a troubling development. The group had bypassed the main entrance and was heading in a different direction. Soon after, Jo opened the carriage door and confirmed that something had changed. He handed Jeong a ring that allowed spellcasting without the use of talismans. Curious, Jeong asked what was going on. Jo informed him that the Cheonji Association's leader had made a sudden declaration. The brothers of the Mok family were to be sent to Blood Corpse Valley. From Jo's tone, it was clear that the valley was no ordinary location. It was a brutal testing ground used to determine the most capable individuals. Fewer than 1 in 10 survived. Jo clenched his fist and promised to petition the association's head to separate Jeong from the others. Until then, survival was all that mattered. As Jo finished speaking, a guard approached from behind and halted their conversation. He declared that they had reached the designated area. His voice was clear and final as he addressed Jeong directly and welcomed him to Blood Corpse Valley. Within the depths of the valley, the students selected for the Corpse Blood Valley trial began crossing a narrow bridge. Among them was Yuqian, who had just regained consciousness. He initially believed he had reached his destination, but reality quickly contradicted that assumption. Yuqian glanced at Jeong ahead and called out to him loudly. A nearby guard struck him from behind, silencing him immediately. He still had no idea where he was being taken. Worse still, his inner energy had been sealed. He considered whether this was how the Cheonji Association treated its hostages. Jeong, aware of the sensation around his neck, deduced that needles had been embedded in the back of their necks to block their internal flow. This suppression applied to everyone, including himself and Yuqian. Curious about the trial, Jeong consulted Blue. She admitted that she lacked knowledge about current internal affairs within the association. However, she revealed that trials like this had never been conducted before. She warned Jeong to remain cautious. Eventually, Jeong arrived at a dimly lit clearing, guarded only by a few torches and men stationed around its perimeter. It became clear that the other students they encountered en route to the Cheonji Association had also been brought here. A masked man addressed the group and declared the location as the testing ground. From that point on, all students would undergo a trial. He revealed a marble in his hand, announcing that identical marbles had been scattered throughout the valley. Participants were required to find one before the incense stick burned out. Failure would result in disqualification. A student raised his hand, expressing confusion. He explained that many had arrived from various sects and institutions and deserved a proper explanation of the test's rules. Before he could finish, a marble was hurled at his head, killing him instantly. The masked man declared that status, rank, or inner power held no significance in this place. Defiance would result in death. Questioning authority would result in death. Even failing the test would end in death. He then welcomed them formally to Corpse Blood Valley. In a chamber elsewhere, Joe expressed frustration. He believed Sonyeon should have informed the association leader that he had taken Jeong as his disciple. Sonyeon, however, dismissed the complaint, stating that the leader's decisions were final and never revoked. Joe admitted he had no other choice but to reach out to the man in the demon mask. He had requested that Jeong be protected because losing such a prodigy was not an option. Sonyeon agreed that Jeong was not merely talented, he had revived the lost sword scripture of the moon vein, a technique thought extinct for a century. He concluded that the leader was testing Jeong's capabilities personally. Back in the valley, the trial commenced. Students rushed toward a nearby lake, desperate to locate one of the marbles. The demon mask figure reminded them that the incense would burn for only 20 minutes. With fewer marbles than participants, only swift action could ensure success. Yuchian sprinted toward the water, scanning the area in haste. He noticed that Jeong had not moved at all, though he quickly dismissed it due to the urgency of the task. Time passed without progress. Suddenly, a student shouted in triumph, having found a marble. As he ran forward to present it, another participant lunged at him from behind, attempting to seize it. The student barely escaped, continuing toward the front. Just before reaching the masked man, he was stopped by Jeong, who appeared in front of him without warning. There remained a small distance between them and the masked man. The student panicked. The attacker from behind was closing in, and in desperation, the student placed the marble into his mouth, intending to swallow it. The man chasing him shouted in protest. However, it was already too late. The marble had been lodged in the student's throat. Jeong stepped forward and grabbed the student by the neck. The attacker behind stopped immediately, unsure of how to proceed. Jeong slid a finger along the student's throat, trying to locate the object. He found the effort tedious and tightened his grip. Everyone present, including the guards, looked on in stunned silence. A moment later, Jeong forcefully tore open the student's esophagus. Blood spurted violently from the wound, and the student collapsed in horror. Calmly, Jeong retrieved the marble from the body and walked to the podium. He handed the object to the man in the demon mask. In that moment, Jeong resembled a living embodiment of a demon. Blue watched from within her vessel and thought that something which should never have been unleashed had now been set free. The man in the demon mask examined the marble and confirmed that Jeong had passed the test. The man in the demon mask informed Jeong that his assigned number was 63, determined by the engraving on the marble he submitted. As the top performer in the first trial, he received a silver insignia, which he tucked into his garments before stepping aside. At first, the masked figure questioned why the association leader had sent a child from a righteous sect to a place like Corpse Blood Valley. He originally believed it was an attempt to dispose of Jeong. However, seeing the result of the trial, he now suspected the leader had foreseen Jeong's potential. In the masked man's eyes, Jeong's nature and conduct were closer to those of the demonic sect than the righteous side. Meanwhile, Jeong stared at the insignia, realizing survival alone was not the purpose here. Competition had already begun, and it was only intensifying. As the incense marking the time limit began to burn low, the environment grew more brutal. One participant kicked another in the face in a desperate dash toward the masked figure. Before he could succeed, his head was grabbed and smashed to the ground by a heavily tattooed participant, who then seized the marble. This new figure radiated a dangerous aura. Among the guards, murmurs spread. Based on the tattoos, they identified him as a member of the Orange Death Valley, one of the 3 internal organizations under Cheon Ma. The group was known for raising only 30 disciples, each selected from among Grand Masters across the land. Soon after, a woman launched a multi-directional attack on several students at once. A nearby guard recognized her as a disciple of the Crowning Flower Chain, one of the 4 assassin factions directly affiliated with Cheon Ma. Her precision and speed were beyond what average disciples could handle. Not long after, a towering figure from the Light Clan, famed for external martial strength, lifted an entire student off the ground and threw him aside. Others began displaying rare talents as well, revealing the scope and intensity of the second trial. The tattooed dude approached Jeong and warned him that he would not survive the next stage. He made it clear that his goal was to kill Jeong personally. While chaos continued, Yuchian remained without a marble. The incense burned low, and he contemplated pleading with the masked figure, given that he was technically a hostage. However, just as the thought crossed his mind, a participant who had picked up a random marble without an engraving raised a question toward one of the guards. Without hesitation, the guard decapitated him on the spot. The grim reality became clearer. Jeong drew attention again when someone pointed at him, calling out his identity. Another student remarked that he was the same lunatic who tore a man's throat open during the first trial. They failed to understand what Jeong was doing as he began reciting a spell. He activated the ritual of binding, a technique that did not require inner energy. Since their internal flow was blocked, this method was perfect. Death energy filled the valley, and Jeong took advantage of it, attempting to absorb as much of it as possible. He hoped the other students would continue their bloodshed, allowing him to grow stronger with each casualty. With just a minute left, Gchan found himself in a brutal fight. He pounded another participant's face into the ground repeatedly until the man died. From the corpse, he retrieved a marble, finally achieving what he needed. Relief washed over him as the incense burned out completely. The demon mask issued a new command. All remaining dropouts were to be eliminated. Guards began to move swiftly, killing those who failed to secure a marble. Gchan watched in shock, overwhelmed by the reality of the test. A guard approached him, prompting Gchan to show his marble. After verifying it, the guard congratulated him for passing. Though relieved, Gchan collapsed. The weight of having killed someone just to pass the trial became too much. The excitement of success faded beneath the heaviness of guilt. The man in the demon mask then announced the outcome. A total of 468 participants had passed, amounting to 60% of the original group. He considered it a favorable number. After a brief pause, he congratulated the survivors. Immediately following the announcement, he declared the beginning of the second trial. Gchan stood in disbelief, still reeling from the fact that he had barely passed the first trial. Before he could recover, the man in the demon mask clapped his hands sharply, silencing the participants. The second trial was about to begin. The masked figure explained that the task was straightforward. Everyone was to survive on the mountain until sunrise. This initially sounded simple, prompting many to glance at the mountain with a sense of relief. However, the masked man clarified the real challenge. 40 flags had been placed throughout the mountain. When the sun rose, participants were required to be near a flag. Each flag must have exactly 8 individuals around it. No more, no less. Any deviation would lead to disqualification. Gchan quickly processed the numbers. With nearly 500 participants and only 40 flags, only 320 could advance. It was not just a survival test but a battle for limited spots. Teams would have to defend their flags while attempting to steal others. As soon as the instructions ended, the field descended into chaos. Everyone scrambled to form teams of exactly 8 members. One participant approached the tattooed fighter, asking to join him. The tattooed dude dismissed the request, realizing he didn't even remember who the person was. Clearly, the man hadn't stood out in the first trial, making him unworthy of inclusion. Teamwork would be crucial, yet only the strong or useful would be considered. The tattooed dude spotted the burly figure from the Light Clan and suggested they team up. He reasoned that securing and defending a flag would be easier with someone strong. Although the big man agreed in principle, he refused to join. He preferred to wait until a flag was found, believing it was better to hide his secret technique for now. The tattooed dude, clearly frustrated, warned that this choice would be regretted. He then approached the woman from the Crowning Flower sect, only to be rejected once again. Enraged, he muttered a desire to kill everyone who refused him. At that moment, Jeong stepped forward and asked to join his team. The tattooed dude froze, caught off guard by the request. Although Jeong had passed the first trial in first place, the tattooed dude declined. Something about Jeong felt too dangerous. Even someone as savage as the tattooed dude found himself unsettled. Blue, observing quietly, was surprised by the rejection. She recognized that Jeong's aura alone was enough to instill fear. She recalled that Jeong had nearly killed the tattooed dude earlier, though the latter had managed to escape. Soon, another team approached Jeong. A girl among them waved at him, and he responded with a smile before agreeing to join. From a distance, Gchan watched, quietly thinking that Jeong would find his own way through this, while he himself needed to focus on survival. A guard struck a drum, announcing the beginning of the second trial. He remarked that many would soon realize the first trial was comparatively easier as the group moved toward the mountain. Jeong walked slightly apart from his new team. One of the members questioned Sowa, the girl who invited Jeong, expressing doubt about including him. Another teammate respected Jeong's strength and asked whether fear was the issue. The conversation prompted Sowa to remark that those who had ignored Jeong were fools. She believed no one would dare target someone like him now, and having him could strengthen their chances significantly. She planned to use him while she needed him, then discard him before sunrise. Unbeknownst to Jeong, the group already had a hidden eighth member tailing them from a distance, set to join once they eliminated him. As Sowa studied Jeong's face, she found him strikingly handsome. It felt like a waste to betray someone like him, so she decided to alter her plan slightly. She approached Jeong with flirtatious intent and told him she liked him. Her words caught the attention of others, who stared in silence. Jealousy began to simmer among the group. Sowa hoped that this display would solidify her authority over the team, using envy as a tool to bind their loyalty. To her surprise, Jeong placed a hand on her shoulder and replied that he liked her too. Sowa blushed at his boldness, interpreting it as a genuine gesture. The others stood frozen, unsure how to react. Then, in a flash, Jeong twisted her neck. The group watched in horror, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Jeong calmly turned to the others and challenged them openly. Shock and confusion spread across their faces, none prepared for such audacity. Without breaking stride, Jeong declared that it was mealtime and mentioned that he was feeling quite hungry.